fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. We are back. Joe Simons, like diamonds, got Patrick Sebile, the legend. So, quick story. I don't know if you remember this, but the very first time we met, I was invited to speak at the Florida Outdoor Writers Association. And I was a little bit nervous, just speaking in general to a big group of people. And I went and sat down in my seat, and you were there next to me. And I didn't know who you were. I knew your name, but I did not know that was you. I never met you before. And you said something nice about I did a good job. And I was like, all right, great, thank you. And then later, Debbie Hansen came and she's like, do you know who you were sitting next to? And I was like, no, it's like some French guy. I couldn't even hear his name because I was like a lot of commotion and people were coming up to me. And he's like, that was Patrick Sebile. I was like, what? And I had no idea until later. Then I heard that you were moving to Polk County around the same time I was. And dude, here we are. How cool.
Here we are in Polk Country, indeed. Yeah.
Yes. God's country. Beautiful. We're sitting here looking at your lake. This is amazing.
Yeah, it's a good place. I really love the place.
And you showed me your 3,400 lures. You fished with every single one of them?
Every single one of them, yes.
Yeah. So what's the backstory? You did not grow up here, obviously.
No, obviously I'm from Texas. You can tell with my accent, Paris, Texas. Yeah, no, I'm from France. I was born in France, in the southwest of France. Yeah. For those of whom who hear us, who knows a bit, I grew up next to the city of Bordeaux, which is quite known for the wine, which I actually pretty much don't drink. And I grew up, in fact, in a little town where there were a number of little lakes, and those lakes were dug at the time of World War II, because that turned to be a main base for the U-boats for the Nazi. France was invaded by the Germans, so they need gravels, to make the concrete and to build that giant base for U-boats that's still in the city now. And so I just ended up to grow up in a place where I have like 7 lakes within just 2-3 miles around the house. And I love fishing, obviously. My first memory is from a fishing memory.
At a really young age.
Yeah, 3 years old. I remember that yesterday. That was funny. There was a picnic with the family in the Gers, which is about 2 hours away. And one of the uncle there was very little pond, for the cows to drink mostly. Yeah. But one of the uncle put a couple of rods, pole rods, 15 feet long, maybe, a float and a piece, a small hook and a piece of bread. And at one point, I remember there was a bite, and I grabbed that little rod, and it was pulling me to the water. So my uncle grabbed the rod, and then maybe he walked, 10, 15 times around the pond, because he ended up to hook like a carp, like a, maybe 8 or 9 pound carp. Dang. So on a small pond, on a small pole, it was pulling hard. Yeah. And I was watching that, with the most interest possible, and that's my first living memory, is that thing. And that's crazy, because I remember I see the fish in my eyes. I really, really remember that day, literally like if it was yesterday. I know that's a crazy thing of the human mind, right? And so I always have the attraction to the water, to the fish. And what happened very early, I liked to fish with lure, but lure fishing was very limited in France. I'm talking in the 70s, right? And to make it short, the only lures we were able to buy, it's very simple. There was the Rapala Original. There was Mepps inline spinners. Okay. There was a kind of crankbait made by a very teeny French company. And there was what's called the tin fish, which was, a shape of a bait fish made of tin with a double hook to jig. And it was a bit flat, so it was moving sideways, kind of. That was it. All fishing was about baits, live bait, dead bait, corn. Depend the fish you were targeting, from zender or pike or carp or eel. So very little was about lure, but I love that, almost right away. And I was around, so the first thing I did, and I remember that well also, was I have that Rapala, and I was curious that if I was able to give a different action, and the Rapala have, and I'm talking of the original models, a bit of very good but basic action, always the same kind of. And I have the idea to cut a little bit the bill just to see if the action was different. And I cut indeed the bill to make it a square from that kind of roundish shape that the Rapala Minnow has. And the action was a bit different, but there was still action, and I got a pike on that. So I was happy. I was about 7. I was happy.
So at 7, you're already kind of designing a little bit. You
modifying,
have that,
I will not say designing, but
a
year later.
A design mindset where you're trying to improve stuff and be innovative. And,
obviously, a little bit of that. But the very big thing happened 1 year later. One of those lakes, even if it was a man-made lake, there were some spring, and that was the only lake that the water was crystal clear. All the other lakes were more or less a bit murky and stuff like that. But that lake was really, truly crystal clear. And there was one tree at one place. There was one tree that fell in the water. And in Europe, we have a cousin of the yellow perch that's here in the US, not in Florida, I think. I never heard about them in Florida. But, that's a bit long fish. That's a predator fish with black stripes in the back, green back, a kind of whitish belly. And that was my favorite fish because it has those red fin. It was very aggressive. You can see them chasing bait fish on top, I was very in love with that fish when I was young. I still love it, but when I was young, that was my number one fish. And because that tree was in the water, every time I will fish that lake, I will go to that tree and I will see some perch, and some of them were like 3 pounds. Most of them were smaller, but some of them were a good size. And for a kid, you look at that, you're like, oh my gosh. And sometime I will cast a Rapala or I will cast a Mepps spinner. And, one fish will go out of the branch and bite my lure. But most of the time they will be there and sitting there. And of course, when you're 8, you cannot, go by yourself like this. So I have to have my mom driving me, and most likely, 9 a.m., not early in the morning when the fish are active, But I realized that if I was able to bring something with a hook inside the branch, maybe I will have a bite. And I knew that if I were to use a live minnow, the live minnow will go in the branch and will tangle. That was not the right way to go. So I was thinking maybe I can have a little lure, shiny, because I knew the perch love everything shiny. And I was thinking if I can drop down something between the branch, maybe I can catch a fish. And I understand that I need to have a movement of an up and down type of movement. And I don't want the lure to go sideways or something, because then most likely we'll snag. So I very simply, I took a long, like an egg weight, a bit longer type of egg weight. I cut it in half. I scratched it. I took a piece of copper wire, a little treble hook. I attached that together, and the tip was to steal the cleaning glove from my mom. Those pink cleaning gloves, made of kind of rubber.
Yeah.
I'm guess there's not too many people today who are using them, but back in the days, there was no washing machine in my mom's house, so I was away. But it was pink. I was thinking that will give some kind of action and color, so I cut a little triangle on it. I tied it on the hook shank. So it was, really a super simple piece of lead, a treble hook, a piece of rubber. And I tied that on the line at the end of I have a long rod that was like 15 or 16 foot long with a teeny, little cranking reel on it.
The modified cane pole.
Yeah, it was made with guides already. But I tied my lure to the line, and I looked at my lure, and I let that lure drop very gently in the water between branches, as my plan was. A few, 5-6 feet, just enough I can see it. And I slowly jigged it, with the end of the rod. I was holding the rod with the 2 arms. And I was gently jigging it like that. And at one point, I saw a perch coming. And in fact, I didn't feel the bite. But I saw, a quick half second, I saw something white. And right away, my mind went, probably that was the mouth. Maybe that fish I've swallowed my bait. Because, my long rod was fiberglass. I was not sensitive at all, right? And when I saw that right away, then I did set the hook, and yes, the perch was on. And I remember I cranked that little cranking reel, again, as a long rod with a very teeny reel. And I cranked and the fish was fighting to the point that the rod tip entered the mouth of the perch, and I pulled backward to bring the perch from between the branches. And it was here, it was on the grass, the fish, jumping around as much as he can. The excitement of that moment of I had that idea, I don't know, a few days before. I made that lure. I came back and it worked the way I envisioned it. Honestly, I'm a bit of a fluent guy, and some people will say I'm not shy, and they probably will be right. But I cannot find the right wordage to explain the mix of emotion. Emotion are created by a number of factors. Some of them are chemicals, and there's something unique to the human life and mind and said. But that kind of feeling I have at that moment, I was taking all my body, into pleasure, into excitement, into happiness. That not only I caught that fish, but there was a problem. I understand well the problem. I found the solution. Yep. I made the solution. I executed the solution, and it worked. And the result was that fish was on. Because I've been fishing that lake and that tree probably for 2 or 3 years already at that moment, and very often I will see, 3, 4, 5. Most of the time they were typically good size. Typically they were a pound, pound and a half, but sometimes 2 pounds, sometimes 3 pounds, which is pretty big for that species, And of course catching a 6-inch one was already making me happy. So think about a pound and a half, So that really, that opened something in my brain.
And this is 7 years old?
8 years old.
Okay, 8, okay.
Yeah, and very exactly. And that's why if you look one of the logo we put on the new packaging for my new lures, you see my face, and you see a little ribbon on the side, and you see since 1976. Well, that relates to this. Because that's the summer of 1976. I'm 8 years old, and that's when I created my first lure. And obviously I was not for a job. That was purely me as an angler. Yes. And that part of it I've never quit me. It's still here today, to this very moment when I create a lure, when I create a rod, when I create anything I do, when I design anything, the very first thing is I find myself and I go with myself as an angler. There's no one time in my entire life and career where I've been working and designing something purely because it was a job. That have never happened to me to this moment. And honestly, I'm glad to share that with you and with the audience. I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud because that's how I really connect with people. And over the years, I started, so I was 8. I started to go in tournaments, mostly for shiner fishing, and I know that's very laughable when you're in the US and you're a guy who say he went into shiner fishing tournaments. Well, it's a huge thing in Europe. That's both a statement of how poor the waters are, because there are not that many predators, sadly, but also the development of a very finesse approach and technique. We have rods. My longest rods is like 14 yards long. And you're using a line that's basically the line like a hair, and you're using a hook that's so small you can hook a mosquito larvae on it.
These are fun knots to tie, huh?
It's very fun knots to tie. But in fact, you can do that like if you relax, but you never really do very well. That's a type of fishing, in fact, that's very advanced. It's not demanding like casting a lure all day long. It's very different. But the attention, when you have a long rod and you target fish that are probably between, say, 4 to maybe 10 inch is the average, but on super thin line, it requires a lot of attention, concentration, and it's very, very hard, in fact, very, very hard. And I started to enter in the tournament trail when I was probably 11 or 12. I won. No, my first tournament was before that, but I won my first serious tournament. I was 11 or 12. I'm not sure exactly 11 or 12. And I never entered any kid tournament. That was a tournament with like 150 tournament guys, and it was almost every guy were adults. And of course, when you're 11 or 12 years old and you win a tournament and you go on the top of the stage and you're the winner, well, it doesn't matter if you catch a bass or if you catch a shiner to win that tournament. Yeah. You just beat 150 dudes.
That is awesome.
And you're like, there's a way your heart beats. So I went doing a lot of tournaments, all kinds, because I started with shiners, but I went in surf fishing tournaments. I went in lure tournaments. I even won one of the largest big game tournaments years later. So I have that flame for a number of years, which is pretty much done with me. 4 years now, I don't have any more of that feeling. But I remember me younger, oh man, I cannot sleep the night before a tournament quite often. I will wake up, I will double check my stuff, if my hooks were good, everything. I was so excited. I really loved it. So I know, even if I'm not anymore in that mood today, but I know very much what it feels. I know the drive it can give you. So I was doing that quite a lot. And then keep designing things for myself. And one of the things through the tournaments was one day there was the main magazine I was reading in France, who one day show how to make your own hook. And especially when you fish with very thin line and very thin, very small hooks, it's not a hook with an eye. You have a flat side at the end of the hook, and you have a special knot for that allows to use a line that's literally like a hair or even thinner than a hair. And when you go on those tournaments, and when you look for a season, it's like the Angler of the Year title, to win the Angler of the Year title on the bass tournaments, you have to perform very well all season long.
Consistent, oh yeah.
You have to be very consistent. That's what win you the biggest award.
Yep.
And I was very much into that. And one much older, of course, dude, give me one tip that one dude gave me was to avoid to lose one tournament with 0, because 0 will kill your season. You have 7 major tournaments. If you have 6 of them that you win, but you have 1 with 0, you cannot win the end of the year.
Just always have to have points.
You have to have that at least one. You cannot have 1 point. Minimum is 6 points, in fact, because you have 5 points by fish. We're catching a lot of small fish. So every fish counts for 5 points, and every grams is 1 point. So the smallest fish, anyway, will count for 1 gram. Yeah. So that's why the minimum count is 6. But at least you don't have 0. Yeah. And for that, you have to use sometimes, to save the day, save the tournament, you have to use hook as small as number 42.
42.
42 is
Can you see it?
Well, you do, but you see it. Today we have our times, but when I was young, of course, it's easier. It's 2.5 millimeter long. So for those of you guys who know what a millimeter is, look on a ruler, what's 1 millimeter, and look at 2.5, and that's the length of the smallest hook that reasonably can be made by hand and can be tied. And you only use that to save a tournament. You never fish like all day long.
Right.
It's just when you see your day is going super bad, at one moment you take a very teeny rod, you put that small line, and you try to save the day and the tournament by catching just one fish. Yeah. It doesn't matter if it's 3/8 of an inch.
Yeah.
So we're far away from the lure. But in fact, that put me on that path, because when that magazine, I have had time to find those hooks. There was only 2 shops I know, and they were like 1 hour and a half drive from my mom's house. And I was a kid, of course, where some people were making those hooks. And one day in that magazine, they show how to do your own hooks. And I was probably about, give or take, 12. And I was like, great. That was very simple. I didn't need many tools, but that helped me to start to do something a bit more handy thanks to that. And then later on, I saw an article about how to make your own rods. And there was a French company that was in my region, and they were making very famous fly fishing rods. Mm. And sometimes they will have one batch of blank, not so good. And also they were making spinning rods, And just luckily, I ended up to meet the sales guy in a retailer, and I just mentioned my interest to find blanks. Again, because I read that article, and they say, "Oh yeah, sometimes we have some blanks that have some little problem. We cannot use them to sell." But yeah, so first he gave me a few, and later I booked a few more, and I started to play, putting my own guides here and there, and having ideas. And beside of that, I developed a strong love for saltwater fish, which is very, very finicky. I mean, I'm quite often I'm saying, and I'm very truthful to that. That's a fish that's even finickier than a bonefish or a permit.
And you've caught how many species of fish now?
788 to this day.
788?
Yeah, that I was able to put a scientific name on. I have another about 30 species. Wow. That I caught, but not species, fish that I caught that might belong to a different species, or might be a baby fish. Sometimes don't have the same color, and even sometimes not even the same shape as the adult. So when I cannot find for sure, I prefer not to count in my count. It's just for me. Doesn't matter to nobody's business. I'm not making money off that. That's just a lifelong dream that I follow, which is to catch new species anytime I can.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if the fish is 1 inch or 1 ton, but it's just one species. And that's why if I'm not sure of the species, I'm not sure what it is. I don't count it. So that's why when I started to fish into the gilded sea bream, that's the name of that saltwater fish, which by the way is a relative to the sheephead and to the pinfish. So again, that might be funny to some of the people who join us today, because when you fish sheephead or especially pinfish here, they are not finicky at all. You put a piece of shrimp, and if there's 10 pinfish around, they all come for a fight. They all want a piece.
Yeah.
Well, that gilded sea bream is like, no. I mean, it's really difficult. Give you an idea, for the average saltwater angler in the southwest of France, that's the kind of fish you maybe catch only 1 or twice a year. My best season, I got 347. So I went really into that fish like big time.
Do they get big like sheephead, or are they small like pinfish?
Well, the biggest I caught was like 13 and something pound. I've seen a picture of a fish which was probably 26, 27 pounds.
Wow.
And when I was guiding in Africa, in northern Africa, I heard a few times people which I think were reliable, and they were commercial fishermen. They didn't care of the record, whatever, but who told me of that species. They told me of a few fish in the 40 pounds, but that's maybe 1 in a billion. Who knows?
See if we can get a picture for the
gilded sea bream. I will show you.
There.
Yeah, it's beautiful fish too, by the way, and it's very strong. It's not that big, but it's very finicky, and once you hook, it's very strong. And when you want to eat it, it's one of the best fish for the table too. So it have all the things that makes it super popular, and people love it, even if not everybody catch them on a regular basis. Yeah. And because that fish sometimes it requires me to make long cast. So I need a rod that was casting very well in some case. Sometimes it requires to have a lot of sensitivity. So when I hold the rod in certain case, I can feel the fish. Because if you wait a teeny bit too much, they spit the bait. And you set the hook when already the hook is out of the mouth.
Got it.
And in some other case, the bite is so finicky, you cannot feel it. You only can see barely the rod tip moving. So I needed a soft tip. So I have that idea. I took a blank for a carp rod. You may know, but in Europe, carp fishing is very popular.
Oh, yeah.
And they are very, very, very good rods that have been designed for carp, where you can cast like 120 yards to bring your bait far away from the shore to reach the very finicky, specimen or trophy carp, which are very, very finicky. So I took one of those blank, but I cut it. I cut the tip, and I inserted a soft fiberglass tip, and I tried several prototypes until I found the right balance where it was casting very well. There was still a lot of sensitivity to feel the teeny bites, and when the bites were super, super finicky, I was able to see the rod tip moving. And doing so, I tried a few things. So first, of course, on the rod tip, that was, 10 inch, say, 10, 12-ish, maybe at the most, soft, fiberglass tip. So first, I put several guides on it. But I find that when I was putting several guides and there was some current or wind, the whole tip will bend and I will not really benefit very, very much. So I try different position on the guides to the day that I find that putting 2 guides very close together was giving me the chance, because one guide alone was very good to see the bite. But when I was casting and there was one guide alone, sometimes the line will tangle around it and basically the line will break. You will have a 3-ounce weight flying 200 yards away with the leader, but I was no longer attached to your reel. And that's why when I added the second guide, I didn't realize that will put me in business of fishing, in fact, but I put that second guide to avoid the line from twisting around the rod tip. And basically, I did that when I was around, give or take, 15 to 16. And for the next 2 seasons, without trying to make a name for myself, but I was catching so many sea bream, especially on the pier. Because, when you're on the beach, well, maybe you're alone. Nobody knows about what you're doing. When you go on a public pier, because at the time I didn't drive, and I will say, of course, because in France you only can drive when you're 18, at least at the time. Yeah. And there was a train station not too far from my home. So my mom will drive me to a train station. I will take the train, and from the train station in Arcachon, on the Arcachon Bay, which is the biggest oil bay in France, it was about 45 minutes by train from my mom's house. From there, at walking distance, there were 3 different piers. So it was very convenient for me, just a backpack, some baits, a couple of rods. And that's where that made a name for myself, really, that you will see that turned to matters. Because I was fishing on those piers, and very often you will have, pier, you may have 40 guys, 60 guys fishing. And that was the ultimate trophy. There was, of course, a range of different species, but the gilded sea bream is so finicky that so often he grab the bait, he feel teeny bit resistant, split it right away. So you need to be super focused. You need to find the right length of leader, which change almost every hour because the tides change. Tides are coming in, are coming out. So you keep changing the weight, you keep changing the length of the leader, even the diameter of the leader, and you have to find a balance. If you have a day where you have a lot of floating grass, you must have a strong enough leader because you need to be able to fight the fish with also a lot of grass on the line, but you have less bite, but at least you can land them. So if the leader is too thin, and if you have a lot of grass on the line, you most likely will break the leader and lose the fish. So you have to find a balance where you have enough bite and you can fight the fish. But if the days where, like a half moon and a very little of current and no grass around, then I can have a more thin leader.
Quite the little scientist.
Oh, yeah. Because that's what paid. That's what helped me. And that's why people will see me more and more. And quite often people will come and they will see that my rod was part of my success. And people will ask me, do you sell the rod? And of course, no, those were made for me. I made a few for some friends. And at one point, I started to sell very few. I sold maybe 2 or 3 dozen rods at that age. But I did that. And then anglers, who saw me succeeding will go to the shop and say, well, we saw a dude on the jetty and he's catching sea bream after sea bream. You have a very unique rod. Do you sell that? And of course, well, no shop were saying that. And when I was the year of my 17th birthday, I went to the first fishing show, exposition of my life. It ended up to be the only one I ever paid the entrance fee for the reason you will see now. I went there, just because I was super excited. I guess most of us, if not all of us, when we love fishing and we know there's a fishing expo around, you love to go there. When you have fishing franks in Port Charlotte that have this big day, 5,000 people show up on that day because they want to be at Fishing Franks because that's a great event and you see brands there. You can buy some new stuff. You can have a good deal on something. I mean, it's very exciting. So that was my first one. So think about that. Yeah. I was fully infused with passion for fishing. I took the train, 4-hour train to go to that city, to go to that show. And I'm here, I'm walking around. And it turned that I've seen over the years, a few of the sales guys when they come to shop. And even a few of them, I didn't realize that at the time, but few of them started to sponsor me. It was not so well organized as today, but because they hear the different shop in different places, so next to my mom's house, but also in Arcachon and another place I was used to go for vacation, they heard, about me. I was starting to get free Gamakatsu hooks, a box suddenly will come and show up in my house and I will have 20 bags of hooks and I will be, oh my gosh, and I was winning tournament. I was, something also that helps. And I was walking through the aisles and I arrived in front of CERT, which was the third largest after, Shimano and Daiwa. That was the third largest company there in Europe and in France especially. And I walked by there, and one of the sales guys, which I knew a little bit, was one of those guys that have gave me already a few times something. He said, come, I want to introduce you to the CEO and owner of the company. And I was, oh, yeah, really? And
you can't even drive at this point? You're still...
No, that's before I drive. Yeah. And I was like, oh. And it took me, so I was, they have one of the biggest booths on the show, and there was a little area for meetings with a table and seats. And he introduced me to Francis Coutu, so the owner of the company. And that gentleman, so welcome me, have a seat, please. And then he starts right away, and he says, Mr. Sebile, I've heard about you, and especially about a rod you design that seems to be very unique and it's doing great. And I would like to propose you to bring that design to us. We will build it for you. We will sell it, and you will have royalties on that. And I was there. I mean, I came just as a visitor.
Yeah.
I have no clue, no idea, not even the pretension of making a business or a sale or money of that. I mean, as I say, I made a few rods. I sold worms and mosquito larvae and stuff like that that I was catching myself so I can sell them to shop to make some money to buy me more fishing stuff, but not in the idea of really a deal with a company and something like that. So I was amazed. But at the same time, just naturally, when he says that to me, I should have said yes right away, right? But I say, well, in fact, I've designed a dozen of different rods for different techniques I do, and all of them have something unique. And I think, as much as for me, that was the last thing I was thinking, that going on that show as a visitor, I will have someone of a major company propose me a deal. But he was probably not as well thinking that young guy who didn't came on a meeting, who came just randomly,
right,
that he proposed this thing too, will tell him, but look, I think there's a bigger picture than one rod. I have a dozen different rods. And he looked at me, and I remember that, because maybe that lasted only 5 seconds, maybe 3 seconds, but it seems an eternity to me, because at the very moment I say those words, at the end of the last word, in my mind I was like, oh, maybe I should not have said that. Maybe he don't want to do any more the deal with me because I asked this or I proposed this or whatever. And he looked at me as I say, it seems an eternity, but maybe only a few seconds. And then with his fist, he hits the table like this, and I say, bingo. Let's shake hands. We'll do that. And without me thinking or planning about that, I was in the business of fishing tackle. And a couple of weeks later, I was invited in their office. I went. The contract was there. I bring my rods. There was 4 or 5 guys from the company, the marketing guy, the head sales. I don't remember, someone else was there. Of course, Francis Coutu, the owner and CEO of the company, was there. And there was a contract, like 20-page contract, and the royalties, the way it worked and all of that. And so basically, literally before I turned 18, I had my first contract, which lasted like more than 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And at that time, I've already invented my first and original hook design. That was a couple of years before. So I have different, learning at school, attend kind of engineering school and learn different things about, milling and a number of things. But one of the things I went through classes of, how you say that in English, blacksmith.
Yeah, like shop class, I guess they call them today.
Yeah, I'm not sure the right word there, so that's probably what it is. So I was in that room, and there was the teacher in that very day was speaking about using metal wires and what we can do, what we can't do, what are the limitations, and this and that. And while the teacher was speaking, I was very interested because I saw a direct link with hooks. And I remember very well, that's funny. And when he spoke, suddenly, like coming from behind my head, there was like a fireworks that goes in the air and explode. And I have like the enlightenment that, in fact, the hooks were getting that wrong. I realized why
the current hooks were wrong.
Yeah, okay. I realized why the hooks were opening. When you have a big fish, a bigger fish than expected, and sometimes not even bigger than expected, with a strong line, why a hook open? Because, well, basically the shape of a regular shaped hook, you have the shank, which goes from the line attachment. You have the shank, then you have a bend, and then you have the point. And in fact, when you hook the fish, so the lip goes here, and I even want to take this because it's more extreme. When you have, a J shape like this, when the line pulls, it pulls here on the shank, the fish lip most likely will go in the lower part of the hook, which is the very bottom, which is closer to the point, right? Mm-hmm. So now you have that distance, I'll show that for the camera, between the shank here and here, where the lip is really. You have that as leverage. Leverage is what makes your hook open.
Yep.
And that's why sometimes you fight, 40 minutes and suddenly, I lost the fish, and you bring back, you were targeting a snook and you hook a tarpon, say. And then you bring back and your hook is open like, 60 degrees like this. That's what happened. And what I realized, that moment I have that enlightenment coming and exploding on top of my head, was if I were to inverse the curve, that means put the curve very close to the shank, now the pull point will be closer to the shank. And I don't know if I have one on that table on selection I made here, but I will show you. I will show you separately or later. And that's why, because I knew already, I was already making my own hooks for a few years. I remember I make the drawing right away, and in the classroom, when I have that idea and that come to my mind, and I make the drawing of the logical of why I can make a different shape that have some specific benefits. So it turned that this company, CERT, was the exclusive, at the time, was the exclusive distributor for Gamakatsu hooks in Europe. So when I came to that very important meeting to me, my first contract, with my rods, I also bring sample of my hook that I made a couple of years before.
You're still in high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I explained, and the guys right away got it. Right away when I explained my hook, and it was not just an idea. That's a problem some people face. Over my life, I have, and I'm not kidding, a few hundred people came to me and say, I have a great idea. I'm sure it can work great. Sometimes people want to sell me their idea. Well, I have more idea than I can do myself, honestly, already. But I understand. I really understand. But in fact, when you only have one idea, that's one thing I learned and one thing I like to share, including to the people who are watching or hearing us now. When you have only one idea and you come to a company with one idea, you are more likely to have a refusal. Because many ideas, in fact, don't work in actual life. Mm-hmm. So when you come and you've made samples and you try the samples and because most of the time between the original idea and the final realization,
a lot of iterations.
There's a lot of change, a lot of modification, adjustment, and there's a lot of projects that just are stopped because the idea was great.
Yep.
I have some ideas that are fantastic, but to this day, there's not the technology to make them happen.
Yeah.
I have one thing that will entirely revolutionize the line industry, but there's a technology I have an idea of, but it doesn't exist today. And maybe to develop that technology I have in my mind, it may cost, who knows, hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe. I will be a total. I think if this idea I have can someday be made to a price that's affordable, I believe the line, the way we know them, will disappear.
Wow.
Or will stay only for the very cheap stuff, for people who go, catching a catfish with a piece of, chicken intestine liver, or something, But no, really. But that's why, but the fact I came, and that's what I share as a insight. When you go and when you want to propose to any company, when you want to propose an idea, don't go with an idea. Go with a project that's already have been proved by tests and modified and stuff like that. And that's what happened when I bring my hook. That was not just an idea, a piece of paper. That was actual hook I was making for myself for the past couple of years and fishing with a lot of success with.
Well, that's what I've loved about meeting you and spending this morning with you, and I've got to see all of the prototypes and stuff you're working on. In every one of them, you said, kind of selfishly, I'm doing this for me. I'm not doing this to market. I'm not doing it because it's flashy. I'm doing this because you love to fish. Like, you're a fisherman first, and I think more of a designer. That's my opinion. Like, because who else has caught, what other designer of a lure has caught 770 species and how many 300 records? And it's crazy.
I made my life around that.
Yes. And so, meaning you study the fish and the bait, probably more than anyone I've ever met, and it shows in obviously in your work. But I thought that was so unique. You're like, I've been designing some of these things for 10 years before they go to the market. Like you said, this thing is 14 years old. I've tested it a million different ways. I want it perfect before it gets out there. It's less about the money. It's about the perfect lure to give us, the fishermen, the advantage.
I've always been, and I am very sure will always be, a side. That have never been a goal. It have good or bad. I'm not saying, but that's the way I am. That's my way. I do the thing for a real reason, not just for a reason which is called dollars. The dollar is always on the side. It have been part of that. It gave me and my family a good life, so I'm very grateful for that, and I'm extremely happy that I'm able to share my creation to the public, to the anglers who want to try. Some people don't like my lure, fine. Some people love them, fantastic. It depends on everybody have a special relationship to a lure, because a lure, when you love fishing, I guess I don't have fully to explain that. If you are part of this podcast we have today,
you probably like fishing.
You probably like fishing, so you know what I'm talking about. But when you have a lure, when you love lure fishing, the lure is, to my point of view at least, I might be wrong, but I'm sharing what I think. That's probably the most important thing of anything you have when you go fishing. Because this is the one thing you will fool the fish to bite a piece of plastic or wood or metal. It doesn't matter if you have a super fancy reel that costs $900 or if you have the first price at Walmart. But if you have the lure that fits the condition, if the lure brings a fish to bite, that's the proof you were right to choose that lure. That's the lure who will give you that pleasure. That's the lure who will help you to create maybe a lifetime memory by catching the biggest trout or redfish or whatever in your life. Yeah. You create a fun. So the relationship to the angler, I'm not saying to the fisherman, I'm saying to the angler. To me, the fisherman is the basic thing. I'm not saying that in a bad way. If you just like to go and grab a rod and put a piece of chicken on the hook and cast that thing in the water, put in the rod holder and sleep and wait until you hear there's a bite, that's fine. You have fun. I respect that. I love that. I've done that a few times too. But that's more going fishing as a relaxing thing. That's where I say you're more of a fisherman. If you're an angler, I think there's reason for different words. There's reason for languages. And I think if you're an angler, you're looking to get a number of experiences. That's why when you go as an angler, you're less likely to kill all your fish. I'm not saying you don't kill any. I kill some fish to eat here and there, but I don't go for the meat. If you're a fisherman, you may more go for the meat. Again, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that's not me. And that's typically not who most of the people who love to buy my creation for themselves enjoy the result of my work to turn what was my creation into the one of the things that help them to succeed and to create fun memories and have great time on the water and sometimes win big tournaments and things like that. That's really great. So that's why that whole thing, I mean, I guess that came from my genes. I was just made like this. Fortunately, my dad didn't like fishing and he passed away in 1978, so I was quite young. And I wish so bad. I mean, like every people who, lose their parents, especially at a young age, you dream your parents were next to you all your life. And I wish so much my dad have seen my achievements and the thing I'm doing, because he's been a big influence, not because he was an angler, but by the opposite, in fact, because he was not allowed to do what he wanted to do. He wanted to be a mechanic. He was the oldest of 12 kids. Back in the days when there was those huge family there's very few today, for sure. And that was the time where the dad, my grandfather, was the kind of person who make a decision for the rest of the life of their kid. So my grandfather said, well, there are tough times. There always will be possibly tough times and wars. I mean, they were living, the kids and the parents, in 6,500 square foot apartment. So every evening you have to imagine, to put the beds or, the stuff they have to lay on the floor. For most of them, there was one bedroom, for the parents and the younger babies. And my dad, who wanted to do mechanics, have no choice but end up to be a baker, because my grandfather say, well, you need to have jobs into the food because people will always eat. So that's why my uncles, there's bakers, there's butchers, most of them have a job that's related to food, basically. Yeah. And that's why my dad was already gone when I was, 14 and thinking about my life in the fisher. And I was thinking, like, well, Dad, you're not here today to help me like my friends who have dad, tell them about life and how to think and how to do. But I'm going to take what I know from you to take the best of it to understand how to build my life. And I understand he was not able to do what he wants in his life. And I took that as, well, then, and it was precious to him. He really dreamed he was a mechanic. So then I took that and turned it into, well, then I'm going to do what I really want to do in my life. That's why I was so much into fishing and into the music, because those were my two passions. And I didn't went halfway. I went like full time into it. Yeah. Even before I knew I will make at that time when I was 16, 17, I was thinking I will leave from the music industry. I was in the music. So I was fishing every time I can. But the other side of me, beside of school, was to go heavily in the music and, and going on tour and stuff like that. So,
and do you mind sharing too? Because I heard this somewhere and I think it's important to share with listeners who have struggled with this in life, and then their kids, like my kids now, having issues with bowling. And I know you said you use fishing as more of a way to get away, and probably music too, right? As a way to kind of get away and be out there with nature and just get away from bowling and the pressure and not having a dad. Do you mind speaking on that real quick?
Yeah, sure. Because that's one thing I really like to do, because I wish I understand some things before I did. that will have saved me a lot of pain. And one person and one personality I strongly recommend people to watch video and read books from is Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you know about him. He's probably, I believe, to my point of view, is today's most incredible thinker. And he's a realist thinker, not just someone who have ideas because they have good ideas. No, we have ideas, well, based on what's the real life he is, hopefully. He's, what's the title? He's a, should I miss his title? He's a clinical therapist. He's a psychologist, and he talks a lot of topics and things about that life that helps people. And I was like, wow, I wished I knew him when I was younger. He will save me years. He will save me a lot of pain. And I really appreciate what he's done, what he's doing, and how he can help people through that. And that's why I like also to share, because sometimes you just open the eyes to someone or the mind to someone by saying or explaining something that really can have a big impact for them. And indeed, so I was young, I was without a father, I was a single kid. My mom, I think, never really knows how to handle a kid, and there's many parents like that. Mm-hmm. So I'm not trying to be more harsh than saying that to her, but I think she didn't realize a number of things. I was very insecure. Like, for example, the first day at school, my mom will go to the school and see a teacher and say, if my son do anything wrong, don't be afraid. If you want to spank him, I will never tell you did wrong. So I was feeling totally insecure because I was feeling I have no support from my mom and my dad is no longer. And I was that's why going to fishing and going in the music was ways to be in situation and with people that were sharing same interests as me. And I was helping me really greatly helping me in life to little by little find my path and feel happy. One thing I've learned, and that's very funny because one of the video from Jordan Peterson I watched not long ago, it doesn't matter, but not long ago, he was saying, well, if you have things to say, you want to express yourself, and you have people in front of you that don't really want to hear you make fun of what you say and stuff like that. Like me, when I started to say I want to make a living from the fishing world.
People thought you were crazy.
Yeah, and people were laughing at me. And I'm 51 years old today, and I know some people who laughed at me when I was, 18 or 20, and who have a job they don't like, with most of the time a very low income. Mm-hmm. So it's very often it's linked together, and who tell me, oh, you have the dream life I wish I had. And those same people when we were, 19 or whatever, or even before that, by the way, when I was more thinking I will make a living of the music, which was a very reasonable thinking based on what was happening to me and to my bands. Many people were seeing things like my mom. My mom, she was dreaming that I will keep doing the job she does, which was being a baker and making cakes at home and go selling them on the farmer market, or to go working for the train company in France. Because once you got that, that's her own words. Once you got there, you cannot be fired. You can stay all your 35 years of work in your life and be sure you have a job for the rest of your life.
Might not be happy, but you'll have a guaranteed job.
I have nothing against that. I'm not making a judgment on that, but I felt that my things inside my heart and my brain and my spirit were against that. That was not my place. That was not me. And that's why that's really important, that thing that I learned by myself and that I heard Jordan Peterson said. It was like, well, if in front of you have people who don't appreciate what you say, just stop talking to them. Just find the people that are right for you. And I think that's what you're building with this community, with Soul Strong.
And did it with a band of anglers, right? I mean,
a band of anglers. That's my new company. Is really the result of my lifespan. It's truly that. By the way, the logo on it, it's myself with less belly. Okay. With my two kids, my daughter and my son. That's what the logo is. It's not a logo designed to make it fancy to help the sales. I don't really care. My message is that's my band of anglers. That's why it's not band of anglers, which will be like a meaning of absolute, like that's the only one. No, that's a band of anglers because that's just mine. There's thousands, there's tens of thousands. When guys are used to go with their best friend or their brother or their cousin or whatever to go fishing, it's a band of anglers. So that's just one of the many. That's a band of angler, but that's mine in that case. That's me, my family, my kids are my main drive in my life, and that's my friends. That's the people I do things with, and some of them working with me, some of them just fishing with my stuff,
Yeah. And did you use the word band? In this case, kind of means a tribe or a community, and you obviously have a love of music and bands, right?
So you got it perfectly. You got it perfect. I really choose that very word because there was that two meanings, and in my case, they were just connected together.
That's cool.
Because on the music, it's hard to make a very long story to make it short for me. But I organized my first very teeny concert. I was just 14 years old. And that was because at school, because if I don't say that, people will not understand. That will seem crazy or not even believable, probably, I guess. At school, the teachers put us, I was in the first year on that type of school, where we are learning of basically doing things, with machines and stuff like that. So there were year number 1, 2, and 3, and I was on the year number 1. And I was probably 1 or 2 months into the new year school. So the 3 teachers put us together, the 1, 2, and 2nd years, all together in the same room, and they say, look, in I think March or April next year, we're going to go spend like kind of 2 weeks or 10 days in snow class. That means bringing the school, not the whole school, of course, but some class going to the mountains where in the morning we will go skiing to create experience as a group. So it's very a way to learn for the kids to socialize and spend time and stuff like that. And in the afternoon to have basically a classroom, but in those big chalets that the school was renting. It's very typical in France. I'm not sure about the US, but in France, that's very typical thing. But then the teacher says, well, but we don't just want you to come with the check from your parents. We want each of you alone or by group of, whatever, 2, 3, 10 if you want, to find some kind of activity you can do that can generate some money, and you will bring that money to pay. So you will deserve, no matter the amount of money you will bring, but you will deserve the fact that you're going to the snow class, because snow class, of course, is not just the regular school. Right. It's very fun. You go in the morning, you're skiing, and in the afternoon, now you have the class, and already that cuts you half your day of school. Yeah. So that just by that, kids love it. At the very second, I remember, I don't remember his name, but I remember his face, and he was the tall of the 3 teachers who says and explained that. At the moment he closed his mouth, at the moment he finished to explain that, it popped up in my mind, I want to organize a concert. I never think about that before. I'm not kidding. I never think about that before. But I turned to know 2 or 3 little very local heavy metal bands. And I have that idea that, man, I want to organize a concert. So I waited the end of the hour, and then when the other kids were leaving the room, I waited to the point that another of the 3 teacher, Ducasse was his name, he saw me staying there, so he understand there was a reason. So when almost all the kids were gone, he says, so, Sebile, there's something you want to tell us? And I say, well, I would like to organize a concert to have the benefit going for the ski class, snow class. But the next thing I say, that's kind of funny, I think. The next thing I say, but I believe I probably need an insurance, so maybe I need the school to help me for the insurance. So they were like, of course, they were taken by surprise. Sure, and I guess, I'm pretty sure, there was never a kid before that who came and say, because the other kids, what they do was they will go to a baker and buy a few cakes, and they will walk on the streets, and knock the door and say, hey, buy me a cake. Right. They will make, 20 cents on the cake.
Or lemonade stands like we have here in Florida, for the kids.
So that was a typical thing. But that was still a good idea the teacher developed, by doing so. I think it was good. It was just not logical that one kid will come and say, I want to organize a concert with heavy metal bands. You're 14 years old. But that's what I did. And then we went to see the director of the school. And I explained the same thing. And I say, I know a couple of bands. Then she was, okay, so we help you to organize what we need to do and stuff like that. So I started to learn what I need to do, the authorizations I need and stuff like that. And it turned out that one of the band in Bordeaux, in my region, just released an album. That band was named Steel Angels, and I didn't know them personally, but I knew a guy who knew them. And they were already a band who already existed, I don't know, it's hard to tell now, but maybe for 5 years or 8 years. So locally they were known, not like nationwide or at all, but locally they were known, and they released an album, you know. So I reached them to ask them to be the headliners, and they were asking 5,000 francs at the time. So 5,000 francs, you know, we're talking of 82, 83, something like that. I mean, I was pretty decent amount of money. And I say yes, you know. And then I asked two bands of my friends. One was Morphine and one was Orialix. I say, hey, do you want to play? I want to organize that thing. And they were like, yeah, cool. You know, they were my age or barely a bit older, you know, a year or two older. And so organized that whole thing and arrived the day of the concert. You know, I rent a place, a concert hall, you know.
And you sold tickets to make, I assume, obviously.
There were 500 seats. So we printed 500 tickets. The mornings, and to this date, my mom is 87 years old, but we talk about that with fun sometimes. We, for the you know, a month or two before the show, every morning when she was driving me to school, we will go 1 or 2 hours earlier, and we will go glue on the walls the poster I've made. I was already, you know, decent at making some design. Yeah. And I was a cousin of mine who have a printing company who print those, you know, like 2,000 posters, you know, like 2 feet by 1.5 or something like that. And we're gluing them on the walls. Now it's totally forbidden, but at the time it was there was no regulation. Yeah. So we will go in a place. Oh yeah, that wall is well located, and we will glue the wall, put the poster, and put some more glue on top of it. Well, here came the day of the concert. We have 500 tickets. We sold them all, and we have like 50 more people who show up, and we grab the money. We let them come in, and without a ticket, you know. That was a tremendous success. Nobody have seen that coming. One teacher who came that evening, you know, to represent the school, he was amazed. And I was amazed. He was probably more amazed than me. Because for me, I organized a concert.
Right.
I'm 14, you know.
That's so crazy.
He brings so much money. Because, of course, 100% of the benefit went to the school that pay almost fully the entire trip for the three years of, you know, my classmates.
Wow.
Everybody was like, so the next morning, I was so excited by that. The very next morning, I start to search information about the non-profit organization. There's a law from 1901 in France where if you create and you run a non-profit organization, you have a lot of advantage into doing things and stuff like that. And that's how I created that with the idea I'm going to organize more concerts. And the 2 bands of my friends who played in front of Steel Angel, you know, the concert they never play with so many people in front of them. They were to play in a bar with, you know, 45 guys.
In a bar,
and they were paid like, you know, 1 franc by beer sold. Right. So if there were only guys drinking Coca-Cola or water, there was no money for the band, you know, that was the kind of thing. And for one time they have a concert and there's 500 people. So they came to me, you know, and they came and say, well, do you want to manage us? Yeah, why not? And I started, so then it's another long story, but then I managed those bands, and a few more joined me. And a couple of years later, you know, we went to a studio a first time. That was my idea. I say, hey, you know what? Let's make a tape with 3 or 4 songs, and I'm going to send that to records companies. And hopefully we have one who will sign them. I like the music of the band, and I was all in. And I did that. I went to Paris a few times by train, trying to meet the different record company, bringing the tape. You know, some people were nice and say, hey, that's good. It's not our thing, or you're not ready yet, but keep doing. You know, some people encourage you. Yeah. Some other people are like, nah. You know, some people don't even answer you. You send an email, or not an email at the time, a letter and a tape, and, you know. And after that time, you know, I didn't have any company who says yes. Then I went to my bands and say, you know why? I'm going to create my own record company. Let's do it. Let's do record ourselves. And I did that. And I released my first record. I was 16.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So we're
away from the fishing, but that's,
because you're doing a lot at a really young age, like mind-boggling. Mm-hmm. When did your Sebile company? When was that formed? And so I really want to spend some time talking about the new lures too.
Sure, and
especially these guys here, Snook and trout,
tarpon,
redfish, and
redfish,
tarpon
tarpon.
candy.
We've done crazy with the dart spin. Well, what happened was then I signed that first contract with CERT. And over the years, I bring and develop a number of things. So my hook went into Gamakatsu and later was copied by VMC, Honor, and more recently by Mustad. Well, that's okay. I didn't have a patent. I was young. I have no clue,
Yeah.
And
you were getting royalties, so you didn't like.
for those sold only by that company. So that means even Gamakatsu, if they were to sell my hook outside of that distributor, my contract was with CERT, that distributor. But nobody at Gamakatsu realized that hook have a big potential. Unfortunately, others did. And it's kind of funny because years later, though, VMC, well, there was no patent, so they came with the Barbarian, which is based on the same principle. If I had a patent, they will not be able to do that. And years later, one of the brands I really like, because the designer makes beautiful baits, it's Megabass. And years later, I saw an article, because the best-selling lure for Megabass is the Vision 110. And basically, two of the three treble hooks are treble hooks made based on my single hook, but put together as a treble hook. And he went in an interview and he said that was the best treble hook ever and explained why that treble hook was the best. And I was like, well, you have no clue, but he's talking basically of my hook that was copied by VMC.
That's pretty funny.
That was kind of funny. Yeah. But that's why over the years, little by little, I went into the guiding. So I guided for like 17 or 18 years in Africa. Especially after once I quit the music business when I was, like 22 kind of. I was in the army. I was in the French army at the time of the first Gulf War. So I enrolled for a couple of years. And I was still a bit searching me. At that time, I had some income from the fishing, but it was not clear in my mind that was my path in life. I was not clear. I really think for several years I will just be and stay in the music. And at one point when I decided to quit the music, that was more of a personal thing. And I was like, I really need to find me because I was a bit lost then. That's where I went. I left France. I spent 6 months in the Sahara Desert on the coastline, of course, because the Sahara is a desert, but it ends on the sea. So I was fishing there. Really to find myself. And that's, in fact, because I was fishing a lot, especially for the sea bream that I told you about, the gilted sea bream, my favorite fish of all. When my friends want to go fishing for that, they were always asking me, where do you go? What tide? Which place? Which bait? And at one point, I was speaking with some of my friends, and I say, I really don't know what I'm going to do. I was so much thinking for years, I will just be and stay in the music, that now I decided to quit that. I'm not really sure. I'm a bit lost. And I was fishing all the time. I was guiding a bit. I was seeing a bit of my fish, which, of course, is illegal. But I was just making that not at all to be rich, just to pay me the food I need, just barely to cover my cost and survive. I'm talking 30 years ago now. I guess the French IRS will not come after me for those fish I sold at the time. But and some of my friends told me, but look what you do in fishing. Why don't you focus on that? That's what it makes sense. You're made for that. That's your whole thing.
Yeah.
You design thing. At the time, I've already have designed just for me, just with no need or idea to sell them or do anything, just because of me.
So you're still cranking out your own lures.
I was searching myself, and I was working with several companies. CERT, I was designing a lot of stuff. I was I work with a number of companies. I was part of the pro staff from Shimano in Europe. I was part of Yosuri. I helped on the field testing on many Yosuri lures. I then had, roughly at that time, I had my contract with MEPS and Mr. Twister, so I was their designer for about 12 years total.
So you've basically helped design
one
way or the other
a lot of
every
things.
manufacturer.
Some of the rods I designed, surf fishing at the time was pretty big in Europe. I designed some of my rod. I have a set of rod that won 5 times the world championship. And I'm talking of a world championship, so in distance and fishing, where you really have a championship where you have like 35 different countries in the championship. It's some of you understand my meaning by that. If it's a world championship, you have to have a representation of many countries.
Yes.
It cannot be one country and maybe one dude from another one. It's not world.
Like World Series right now.
Yeah. So but I always have some fun when I hear those things. So that's why I develop a number of things. I have lures that I design like for MEPS that like 30 years later, like today are still selling. So of course I don't know how many, but 30 years later they probably have sold tens of millions, if not a few hundred millions units of those given lures. And I have my my operations in Africa on 3 different lodges. My first one was a very teeny one that was in Morocco. That's where I started. But then I have my operation in Guinea-Bissau. That's pretty big lodge with 32 employees, 12 boats and stuff like that. The other one in Ivory Coast. And at one point I felt tired of being a guide and handling things and there and living in Africa. I've done pretty much all I have to do. I beat many records. I helped many customers to beat records. I was named 1 year best fishing guide in the world. So true or false, I don't know, but
wow.
I got that name and stuff like that. And also, I was so much living on an island, a remote place where you just see your customers coming. They are with you for a week or 2 weeks or something, and then they leave. And here's the new batch of customer. You just do that 10 or 11 months a year. You have no more real social life with friends or family and stuff like that. So I started to get tired, and that's where I took the roots of Sebile. I was like, I really need to think of my next big step. My name was starting, at least in Europe, was starting to be a pretty big name. I was writing a lot. I wrote more than 800 articles for a number of magazines.
800?
Yeah.
Dang.
I wrote 7 books. One of them, which is still to this day one of the biggest sellers of fishing books in France. Oh, I will show you. I have several books about surf fishing, about baits, different things. But they are not in the US.
Yeah.
They are in French. So, yeah. But I was like, I feel like my time as a guide and living like full time in Africa, I'm done for that. That was the feeling. And I dig into me to feel, okay, what will be my next step? And that's where I felt, I've been working with a number of companies, designing them a lot of stuff. But without the full freedom of really doing the things the way I want. And that's where I started to have that seed to create my own company. But beside of that, in 92, I came for the first time in my life. I came in the US, I came in Florida with one target, that was the snook. Because I love different species, obviously. And several friends of mine told me about the snook, and they said, oh, that's great fish. You should go for that sometimes. And I was, yeah. I put that on my list. And one day, that's why I chose to come. And I came in August or September, probably August of 92. I came in Florida to target the snook. And I came, in Hollywood, which is next to Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah.
I booked a hotel there that was owned by French Canadians. And I was fishing on the pier, if you know the place. For those of you who know, there's a pier. That was my first experience of fishing in Florida. And I felt in love both, not only with the snook, of course. You
caught one.
Oh,
many.
Yeah, I guess. But I fell in love with the U.S., with Florida and with the U.S. I like the U.S. forever. Since I was young, my mom was very grateful for the U.S. troops to come and free the country. Yeah. I came from a family where we love the U.S. and we love Americans. So it was natural. But I have no idea how much I will love the US. That trip was mind-blowing and eye-opening. And that's why over the years, I grew up the feeling that I love so much the US, I want to go there more and more. To the point, one day I realized, but really the place in the world, and I was traveling a lot, but the one place in the world I feel I want to live is Florida. At one point, it came in my mind. And that's why when in those, 2001, 2, 3, I was starting to feel, my guiding time, I feel I'm done. Yeah, I gave what I have to do. I don't feel so much the excitement I have before and stuff like that. It became kind of a routine. We are also working very heavily and stuff like that. And then there was a civil war, and I saw all the problems of living in Africa where overnight you can lose your investment and that's even dangerous and stuff like that. And that's why putting those points together, I was like, then I want to create my own company that I have the control of, that I can take the decision of what I want to do, which way I want to do. And also I want to live in the US and Florida really specifically. And this was the big drive to bring me to create Sebile. That was a big drive. So I created Sebile and I took some of the lure I've already designed just for me that were never made and proposed to anybody, just like the Magic Swimmer. When I created Sebile back in, like 2002 or 3, the Magic Swimmer was already a bait I made maybe 10 or 12 years before.
For yourself?
For myself. Yeah. I was building, say, a dozen or two a year just for me. Sometimes I will give one to a friend, and that was it. There was not even a name. I was just calling it the Swimmer. In fact, the Magic Swimmer was when we needed to put a name on it, and Francis Coutu, that gentleman who many years earlier gave me my first contract and chance to go in the fishing world, was the one who found that name. Because I try to explain, I say action is very realistic. It's a bit magical the way it's realistic, the way it swim. And he said, then let's call it the Magic Swimmer. And I was like, yeah, let's go. That was just a simple little story about the name.
Yeah.
And that's why I bring a selection of my baits that I already created. I created a few more, put them together, and that's where I moved. I moved like right away from Africa to Hong Kong to be there where around that area in Asia there were many possibilities, because I made a study. First, I really wanted to build a lure in France, and I find that there was no company that have all the knowledge needed, and the cost will be so high that the price I will have to buy the lure made by a factory will be already the price that normally I should be able to sell the product.
It's not feasible. Yeah,
that was not feasible.
Yeah.
So that was not I didn't have a strong wish to go work in Asia. That was not like a big drive. But I ended up to find, when I made the study, that was the only way, especially as I want to make a certain level of quality in terms of finish and painting and stuff like that. Because I even studied about the US, and I find that was why there was no really, except a few handful, guys who have a one-man company, right, and who make just 200 or 300 lures. But to make a sizable business out of that, and to give me access to all the toolings I want, because one of the excitement, thanks to what I've learned in my years in school, I've learned the mold making, I've learned plastic injection, and compared to what you can do when you carve wood, it's exponentially open more potential on the way you do and you make the things happen. So I will not say it's limitless, but really the limits.
Yeah, with 3D printing now and how many molds you can make, and
exactly,
you can scale so quick once you have a good
So that's
bait.
why I wanted to do that, not so much to make a big company, but to have access to all kind of tool that let me play, because I'm a player. It's a game. It's a passion. When I design lure, first, there's the idea from the angler. Then, second, came the idea as the designer. And then here come the engineer part, where I play, when I make my shapes, when I tune my lures and all of that. I love that. Even if I was not paid, I will keep doing that just because I love that. The money I've never been. It's a plus. It give me a living. It's fantastic. I'm blessed. But even without that, I will do that to the day of my death, because that's me. That's one of my strong passion. And that's why when I created Sebile, now there was all those things together. And when I came with my first, set of lures and start to show, well, right away, honestly, I have no clue exactly. I was afraid, like I believe must be every guy who creates a company. You have to be afraid. You have to have some level of ambition. You have to believe in what you do, but you have to be always afraid that maybe you're going to fail. People who go and only think they will win, well, if they win, good for them. If they don't win, they can have huge disappointment, and that can be very, very hurtful. So it's hurtful anyway when you fail. Yeah. So I went with that mindset. That I believe I can do, but maybe it will not do. And it took me by, in a storm, I didn't. So coming.
It exploded. Your
completely exploded.
In a good way, meaning.
Oh, yeah. In the right.
You couldn't keep up with the demand.
It was crazy. For those of you who have already created a company or who have studied how to create a company, you make what's called a business plan, where you try to list the different path you have to go, what you have to do, what timing you have to do, but also you have to include the sales, because that's part. If you don't make sales, if there's no money coming in to pay the expense, then, well, unless you have, limitless money, right, and you just spend your money by fun, where I was not at all. Since I'm 22, I give money to my mom every month to help her, because she have a very little retirement. She have like $500 a month. How can she really decently live with that? So since I'm 22, I take care of her. So I knew that the money must be part of that thing. So when we make the business plan, we put things that we think logical with some level of safety, but suddenly my baits took the world by storm. It was everywhere. Everybody wanted my baits, and suddenly I faced the situation where at one point the orders we received were 21 times the amount we put in the business plan. Nobody have seen that, because it almost never happened. It's a rare thing that happened to very few people in very few industries. Yeah. And that was crazy. And it was a nightmare, in fact. I'm very sad to say that, or to think that, or to feel that. But in fact, those years were not years that I enjoy much because it was so crazy that we were always under an amount of pressure that we never really have the time to appreciate the fact that, because when we have 21 time in orders, 21 time or businessmen in orders, we ended up to deliver 7 times the business plan. So typically when you put together a business plan, when you are 90% to your business plan, you are like, we were pretty close. That's good.
You're
Keep
thousands
going.
of times over.
When you're 100%, when you're spot on your business plan, you're like champagne. When you're 10% above, you're like, my gosh, it's unbelievable. We achieved 7 times the business plan, but we were not able to fulfill 14 other times the business plan. People were shouting at us, where are the baits? Yeah. I have pegs that are empty on my wall, and I have every single day anglers coming in my shop asking for your baits. And that was not just in one region, say Florida or Texas. That was all around the world. That was crazy. In a matter of 3 years, we were in 72 countries.
Wow.
I mean, there are companies who are 50 years old. They are still struggling to be in more than 2 or 3 countries.
Yeah.
So that was how crazy it was.
Your baits work. They caught fish.
I guess so.
Not just fishermen.
Part of the thing that have happened, which were unexpected, that you can't rely on, were winning tournaments, big tournaments, a number of tournaments, beating records. In Japan, for example. In Japan, I have a magic swimmer. Japan are islands. It's one country, but not on the mainland. It's only islands. And you have 4 or 5 main islands and many very teeny ones. Well, one of those 4 or 5 islands, main islands, the magic swimmer beat the long time record bass, largemouth bass, a big fish like 17.5 pounds or something like this, which I believe to this day is still the record of the island. And a few months later, I went on a tour in Japan. My distributor there organized me 12 days of fishing in 12 different places, and each time with a different media. And from the day one to the last day, everywhere I went fishing, every day I beat the guys I fished with. It was not a tournament. I was
using your lures, and they were using.
I was using my lures. There was one journalist. Sometimes there was also a cameraman or a photographer, and there was 1 or 2 other anglers on the boat. Sometimes a bit more. They have for saltwater fishing. They have very long boats that reminds the panga in Mexico. So you can be fishing with lures like 6 or 7 guys on that. And that was my first time fishing in Japan. Most of the fish I was catching, I never caught before. And I was beating the guys in their own waters with my lures. So they were like, what's going on? And especially...
It's magical.
Yeah, and especially one guy, I went fishing with the guy from Lure Magazine. So it's a big magazine. It's like half-inch, color, very expensive, like $50 monthly magazine. All about lures. And I went fishing with this guy, with one guy who that year on the BASS professional tour in Japan. Yeah. That guy was number 3 or number 4 on the Angler of the Year. I fished that day. I reached the 17th fish before he got his first fish. He was on the front of the boat on the electric motor. I was on the back.
So he had the best spot, technically, yeah.
So the guy cannot believe that. The journalist cannot believe that. And that's what drove, the magazine to want me to write for them. So I ended up to write for them. I was the only non-Japanese guy who write in Japanese magazine because they value very much what I was to say, because that 12 days of fishing, nobody have seen that coming. Yeah. I beat every single day, every single guy. So I beat the guy on bass fishing in Lake Biwa. I was using the stick shad. And the guy was trying everything he have in his box, spinner baits, everything. I reached the 17th fish when he finally got his first one. And at the end of the day, I think I have 21 or 22 fish and you have 2 or 3 fish. And that was it. Boom. Next thing you know, the stick shad. So we have to change the name because there was a Japanese company who have a lure called the stick shad. So we have to create, I don't remember the name, another name. But then our biggest sell in Japan was the stick shad, and that was because of largemouth bass.
Wow.
So you see all those things went, and it went all crazy. And then my life went totally crazy because I was working a lot. I ended up to break up with my fiancée. I was just traveling. Give you a number, 2009, I think, or 10. I spent 310 nights in hotel around the world.
Whoa. Traveling
to go on show, to go, fishing with journalists, all kind of things. So that was the life. And then I moved, pure fishing and join us and reach us and propose me to be their designer and to have the Sebile brand with them. And me and my partner, we talked about that. And that was so complex to grow a small company who suddenly faced such a booming demand all around the world and stuff like that, that we end up to feel like, you know what, let's go with that. I will not have to worry anymore about the warehousing, placing order on time. I will not have to mess anymore if there's not enough product.
Yeah.
And we believed in the offer from Pure Fishing because it was say, well, we will put Sebile and we'll give all the marketing support to make of Sebile the hard lure brand of the Pure Fishing group, knowing that Berkeley was the big, strong, soft plastic brand. And just so we made the deal. And 6 months into my new job as global director for Sebile and designer for Sebile, but also I was working with Penn. So if you fish with the Penn Slammer 3, well, that's part of the thing I've done with the team there, and a few other things. I work with Spider Wire, I work a bit with Berkeley also and stuff like that. And then 6 months into the new job, and after we sold the company, the owner of Pure Fishing decided that was Jordan Corporation at the time. They decided that every brand can do whatever they want. And then the boss from Berkeley say, I want to go in the hard lures. And that totally break what was supposed to be done with Sebile, and that's why that was really a waste of my time at the end of the day to go to Pure Fishing. Well, thanks to that, I got to meet a lady who turned to be the mother of my kids. So I will do it again without thinking, just because now I have my kids thanks to that path in life. But beside of that was really a big waste of my time.
But I also think knowing what you're doing now, you learned a lot of lessons about growing and scaling a company and partnering. And
the thing is, I'm not saying Pure Fishing is wrong. I'm saying the way I am, the way my mindset is, I was not made to be in a big corporation. And that's more, I was disappointed that the direction taken hurt us because it also hurt us financially on the deal we've made. But that was really the fact that there's a corporation behind, and I'm more a free thinker, and it's really hard to be between 4 walls and stuff like that. So. And I believe many people have seen that in, a number of times I was limited in what I can do and stuff like that. That was very frustrating.
And now you're not. Baby.
And exactly. And that's why that have helped me to that path to find myself. And that's why today, Urban Anglers, I'm very serious. I do everything and I see everything like that is and that should be my last company ever, my entire life. That's the result of the 30 plus years, or we can count since 76 if you like. That makes even more sense, I think. So it's 43 years in the making. And that's the result. That's my lifestyle. That's what I do. I do it for reasons which are driven by passion, fueled by experience, doing that for a long time. And I've always been in love with the lures as a general speaking. That's why you mentioned my personal collection of 3,400 lures. Not my lures from all kind of brands.
You fished, yeah.
Each of them. Every single lure in my collection at least once went in the water. I swam them at least once to see them, feel them swimming. And
study them.
Yeah, because I love it, because that's my passion.
What do you study more? Do you study the predator fish, or do you study the bait? Or everything?
Everything. Really, I cannot say one more than the other. I study everything. One thing that have helped me to achieve a number of fishing success, which maybe translate today in the way my lure works and help everybody to catch fish, is that a number of times I've stopped fishing just to look at the fish behave.
Underwater scuba diving, or
no, just watching. Okay. I have a little sentence which really is very true. On purpose, I choose not to scuba dive. Because, and that's where it's a bit funny, I guess, because I want to make a parallel, with what's erotic and what's pornographic. So for me, the fact I can find and understand what the fish are doing underneath the water without myself being into the water, it's erotic and it's highly exciting, because it makes my brain being very excited that I have to think, and it suggests things. Yeah. And I have to find my way through that. If you simply dive and you see there's a fish behind a rock, okay, you see it right away. It's like pornography. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's a very different approach. Yeah. And I love so much the erotic approach. And that's why I stay out of the water and I study the fish like this. Maybe a bit crazy, but hey, I don't care. That's me.
So let's talk about that, because I think there's a learning lesson there, right? I think many anglers, and I've talked to them, what are you going for? Anything that'll bite, right? They've done no studying. They've got a hall pass from the spouse, and they're just going out there to try to catch anything that'll bite. How do you possibly catch 700 something species? I mean, that's obviously all over the world.
Yeah.
Are you spending a lot of time studying the trends and the biology of these fish?
It's a number of things. Not that I don't want to answer. It's just a number of things. Yeah. It all started by the first day ever I fished in saltwater when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
Because I was used to fish all those lakes around my house. But basically, when you caught like 12 or 13 species, you caught everything that was in the freshwater around.
What's next, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the very day that a neighbor who was like 40 years old proposed me and told my mom, I like to fish on a fishing charter boat. You have 30 or 40 people on the boat. And he said, if you want, I can take Patrick with me. And of course, I was like, hey, yeah. So she said, you sure? Yeah, sure, no problem. All right. That very day, just that day, I got 12 species.
12 new species.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Just fishing, I don't know, 5-6 hours maybe on a party boat, and just with what's called a chicken rig. You have a weight on the bottom. You have 2 leaders and a piece of clam or something or squid, and I was so every time I was catching a new fish, I was like, oh, what is that? I knew 1 or 2 maybe, but the other one I was like, what is that fish? I have no clue. And I got so excited. So I didn't put myself a goal, let's say I want to reach 100 or 1,000, but I was like, it opened in my mind the idea that I want to catch as many new species as I can. And I was already in love with the fish. I already have several books about fish, not just fishing, but fish. Mm-hmm. And it drove me to, every time I will go in a new water, try to find what is there. Can I know in advance the type of fish, the type of species? And little by little I grow. So that's why sometimes I cook, of course. Sometimes I catch a fish randomly. I'm targeting another one.
Right. Or
I'm just fishing here and here I go. I catch a fish. I don't know what it is. But I've been on the Coral Sea 5 times. Every time I spend 2 or 3 weeks on the sea. And there's one fish I keep wanting. It still escaped me. That's called the Chinaman. And if you look online, the shape, that's kind of a snapper. It's not a snapper, but kind of look like.
Yeah.
It's massive, it's powerful, it's mean. And everybody I have to talk with that I've caught at least one, they say that's one of the meanest fighter you can think of. And it's a bit of a rare fish. And I want to go again on the Coral Sea, not because you have 100-pound GTs. I mean, yes, I want to catch them.
Yeah.
I caught them already, but that Chinaman, even if I can catch... Even I can catch a 12-pounder.
Yeah.
Of course, I prefer if it's a 45-pounder. But you know what I mean? When I count the species, the size don't matter so much. And I want that fish very bad. I want a mash. I want the silver mash here on the side of the Himalayas mountains because it's kind of a barbel. Like the suckers. The suckers fish we have north of Florida, stream and stuff like that. It's the biggest of the family. It's called the Latin name is Tortor, T-O-R. That's like a sucker that can reach 150 pounds, that have scales like a tarpon, and you can find them in streams that have 40-degree angle, and they can swim through that, and you catch them with lures. Think about hooking a tarpon in a stream that run down 2 or 3 miles, 40 miles, and that guy is running. So you have to fish with 80-pound braid in a river, and you have to probably run maybe half a mile fighting the fish. Yeah. Well, I miss this guy. For the moment, at least. So some of the fish species I caught were directly driven. I came to Florida, I just told you a few minutes ago, because there was one goal, and that was the snook. Mm-hmm. And I'm so glad he turned to be one of my whole life favorite fish. That's a big reason I finally move and live in Florida is the snook. Snook and bass are 2 of my all-time favorite now. And here I got both, and I have a house in Fort Pierce, so it's fantastic. It's probably the big snook mecca, in the world. And then here in Lake Wales, where I have, lake with big bass as well.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I organize my life around my passion, and, that's what I do. And that's why, I study. So some fish I study, I try to learn about their behavior. I talk with anglers who travel, or local anglers, of course, and stuff like that. Like my favorite fish, gilted sea bream. At the beginning of the podcast, we spoke about that. And I say, at some point, I had to speak with commercial fishermen, and he told me about gilted sea bream. They were maybe in the 40 pounds. Oh my gosh, So there's a lot of things. And that's why, by studying the fish, studying the habits and the behavior, some of the things I learned, and that you only can really learn by your own experience and by fishing in many places, you end up to realize that fish, or predator fish, I will speak, because of course when we go with lure, it's obviously not to catch carp, even if once in a blue moon you can catch one. But when you target predator fish and you target them with lures, you end up to realize that there's a number of situations where certain predator will react to that by a bite or by going away or not biting. And the more, I've been fishing, I fished to this moment, I fished in 68 different countries. I find a number of similarities in situation in countries that are totally opposite. Look, I will give you a very simple example that I think is very open-minded. I told you I was the lure designer for MEPS and Mr. Twister for 12 years. Well, because at the same time I was guiding in Africa, I was in need to develop inline spinner for trout and salmon and steelhead, okay? But I was in Africa. I was in Guinea-Bissau, which is, on the west coast, which is very tropical. The average temperature is probably 90, 95 degrees. Okay. The water is surely not the temperature that the streams where trout and salmon live. Yeah. But because there were big tides, like 15 to 20 feet tides, I have places where at a certain point of the tide, the water was shallow on rocks, and there were a lot of turbulence that was exactly similar as a stream in Alaska or in Scotland or in Norway or in New Zealand. So I was able to be in Africa, do my job, run my lodge and all of that, and do my job for MEPS, where I was designing inline spinner that I knew I ultimately will sell for salmon and steelhead and trout in cold waters. I was able to field test and fine-tune my lures, fishing at a certain time of the tide on a certain spot where the water was 80 degrees, the air was 90 degrees, and the fish there were snappers and ladyfish and stuff like that. Yeah. So that tells you a lot about the fact that when you understand when you have the chance to, when you create the chance to, of going fishing in different places and different fish, you end up to realize this type of fish have this type of behavior. And I will find a fish, even if it's not the same look and whatever, but if he lives in the same type of environment, most likely I can catch it the same way as this fish which I know. So now I can live with confidence and go fishing in a country I never fished before, for a fish I never fished before or caught before, but because I got the information that he lives in such kind of environment, I pretty much already know which way I can approach this fish and be successful. To the point that it happened to me several times in my life, not one, several times, that I went fishing for fish in certain ways and people were telling me, no, that will not work. Nobody fish like this, like that. Yeah. Guess what? Bam, bam, bam. Oh, really it does? Well, yeah. And that was not randomly, that was not by luck, that was by having a certain approach and thinking and studying. Now, fishing is still fishing. Sometimes something happened with a bit of luck or a bit of random positive things that happen to you. Yes. If you don't want to put the word luck, which have a lot of meanings behind. And yes, that happened to me a number of times. And that's why every time I design a lure, you find something that have a logical behind, that makes sense to a certain way. For example...
Yeah, let's talk about some of the lures you're making now with Band of Anglers.
Yeah, so I have several brands on purpose because I was like, there's not many people like me probably who have the chance to fish in so many situations, freshwater, saltwater, blue water, inshore,
surf casting, doing everything.
Surf casting, cold rivers, hot lakes, and all that. So the fact there are several brands allow for a given brand to have a specific focus. So, for example, Oceanborn. That's the first brand I came with when I created a Band of Anglers. I wanted to start with some lures dedicated mostly for saltwater and more than that, say, to big fish. Well, there's a number of times where you have big fish that are preying on small fish. And the problem is if you have a big fish and you need heavy line, you need heavy rod, well, maybe that teeny lure that you can find don't fit the deal because the hook is too weak. Maybe the body will break or something. So when I came with Oceanborn, right away, it was clear in my mind, I want to achieve a number of things and I'm going to work on that. So, for example, if you look at that little popper that's called a flying popper, and that guy is called the flying pencil, they are teeny topwaters. Those are a 4-inch and a 4 1/4 inch. we'll got them like in December of 2019. Well, but both of them, they have a wire through that's 300 pounds. And that's why they don't have a hook on the belly, because my goal is not to catch a 2-pound trout on that. I mean, it's welcome to have a trout, a 6 pound, a 10 pound, whatever, even a 2 pound, why not? But the goal is when I'm in a situation where there's large fish, maybe a 42-inch snook, maybe a big striper bass, maybe a 100-pound bluefin tuna, or 150-pound tarpon, feeding on small finger mullets or, glass minnows. Now I have a teeny lure, and I'm planning to even make smaller than those in the future, where I actually can put my 65-pound braid, because I know there's 300-pound wire. In the tuna rocket version, the tuna rocket come with a single hook. They are even more loaded with weight. Now I have a 4-inch lure, a 4-inch popper that's 2 ounce. So now I can have 80-pound braid. So the day where the tuna are feeding only on very teeny sardine or something, I have a small lure that will do the job, not only to be strong enough, but also to have enough weight. And that's where my innovation came into the play. When you look at the lure, you see there's wings on the side. Because if you're on a top water, typically it's because you want, the lure swim on the top, right? Mm-hmm. So if I put like this guy have 2.5 ounces of weight in the tuna rocket, if there were no wings with 2.5 ounces, he won't be on the top, period. Then it's no longer top water. Mm-hmm. Well, thanks to the wings on the side, now it gives water lift like a surfboard.
Yeah.
So now I can have the tuna rocket model that's 2.5 ounces, that have a single hook that fits 80-pound braid, and now I can go after 150-pound bluefin or yellowfin tuna with a teeny lure and still work on the top. And then beside of that, the same lure, I also come with 2 models that have just a travel hook. I have a regular sinking, because the regular sinking casts pretty well when you want to fish in shallow water. It's pretty good, and it have a fantastic walking the dog action, because the wings on the side give water lift, which helps a lot when it comes to the walking the dog action. You have also the ribs underneath the belly, which first of all are made to lower the air resistance in the air, like the dimples on the golf ball. You improve your casting distance, but also when you have a walking the dog action, now the water flow go more easily than on a regular lure. A regular lure, the belly is like this. Right. So there's more resistance to the lure to go sideways, which is what's the basic of walk the dog action. In that case, we have the ribs that allow for the flow. So the lure have a great walking the dog, also because of that. And then I come with the SLD. The SLD is the best balance I've been able to put together. Super long distance, SLD. So long distance, of course, that's still a lure. Both of them comes in SLD. You can both work them on top, but also they work as swim bait, because the SLDs, the way I tune them, the position of the weight, the amount of weight, make those bait allow for swim action. So if you want to just use them as a popper or a pencil, yes, you can. But suddenly you want to try a different, more natural swimming action, just cast them and retrieve them, and they swim. Actually, the popper cranks. You feed it in a rod. You even see the rod tip cranking, like on a crankbait. Create a lot of turbulence, which is the meaning of a popper anyway. Make a lot of noise, right, and turbulence. When the flying pencil in SLD have more the action, the swim action, like a baliu or a ladyfish, more of a slender bait fish, and it swims very well. And the last thing is both the SLD and the tuna rocket, they're so loaded in weight that not only they're great bait for redfish and sea trout and snook and tarpon when you fish inshore, but because they're so heavy, you also can jig them. Actually, I cocked on larger size, I cocked amberjacks in 300 feet of water, jigging down deep, SLD lure, SLD flying pencil. So that's why I like to develop those things where there's a range, because I see the possibilities they can do and I achieve more. So when I'm on the flats, typically when you have a 4.25-inch top water, typically it floats, right? So that means for that length, what is typically the weight? It's in grams, it's about 18 to 28 grams, which means it's 5/8 to 1 ounce. Well, in that case, when I go in a SLD, this guy in SLD is 1.5 ounces. This guy in SLD is 1 ounce 3/4. So when it comes to casting distance, compared to the floating one, it's not a teeny. You're not casting 5 feet longer. You're literally doubling your distance. So for when you fish on the flats, like you do, like I do, we know that the more far away we can reach a redfish, the best chance we have to hook that guy.
Yep.
Because the more far away we are, the less risk of spook him we have. And that's why now you have something very heavy. People will be, what? 1.5 ounces. I'm not going to cast 1.5 ounces lure in 1 feet of water. Well, give it a try and change your mind. You will see by yourself.
I love it.
So that's one of those reasons. And, I'm just showing a few of the baits quickly.
Yeah.
I just came this year with 29 different shapes. So we have pretty good range for many things. But if you want to go in the minnows, I have a patent for that. The minnows, for those of you who fish minnows, you know that typically if you have a minnow that have a fin lip, it have a great action, but the fin lip can break easily, sadly.
Yeah.
Or you have a thick lip. In that case, they don't break easily, but the action is not that good because, in fact, really the thickness of the bill have a direct impact on the swim action of the minnow. Well, when I designed the wide gap minnow, I came with that patent where I have several anchorage points for the bill. So now, if you look sideways, it's very thin. Fantastic action. You can slow roll like you cannot believe how slow you can retrieve this guy. And it swim. We've been trying that last week, trolling for Wahoo with the rod tip down, 24 knots. Rod tip up, 18 knots. The same lure that you can slow roll to catch a snook in the shallow.
Or a tarpon or
tarpon or stuff like that. And I'm coming with smaller size, and some small size will be fantastic for redfish. So you see, that's where the innovation with a good, strong backup, with approach which come both from an engineer with some scientific logic behind, and also ensure that by a patent, because it's important. When you spend the time and the money it costs to do all those things, the terrible thing is when someone just come and copy you right away.
Yep.
Because, the investment you've made, you need to pay back the investment. That just makes sense, right?
Oh, yeah.
And but I'm coming with great range of lures that people will love.
So it's going to be tough for anyone to keep up with you coming up.
I don't know.
And you showed me some other stuff that's not even out yet. I'm like, whoa.
I don't know. But you see, that's why I choose as a transition. So that was Oceanborn. I'm going to Engage. Engage is probably the brand that will be the closest to the Sebile brand for those of the people who are viewing or hearing us now know. So I came first with that shape. That's one design. I call it the Twitch Shad or the Twitcher. It's the same design. It's the design pretty much of, say, a finger mullet or little bait fish you find inshore. And what I did was, I know this kind of shape, which typically is called a twitch bait, can cover a range of situations. That's one of the most efficient type of bait, but also that's one of the most fun. Because honestly speaking, when you just have a minnow that you simply cast, or a crankbait that you just cast and crank, the action itself is not super fun. It's very efficient, catch fish, no problem, but it's not so fun. But when you go into twitching and jerking and making pause, now we make a lot of variation, and the variation themselves are super fun.
Yeah.
I can have a bad fishing morning where I catch nothing or just a fish or two, and I still have a lot of fun because I've been playing all morning long with my twitch bait. So I love twitch bait, and that's why I realized that, in fact, there were a few things that I can bring thanks to my vision, my design, and my knowledge. I knew I have that feeling I can bring some stuff that will really help me, and by saying me and also other anglers, to achieve more things. So first thing, that shape, I designed it the way that I can make a shape that can make the longest cast and still have a great twitching action. To give you an example, that Twitch Shad, which is, so they are twins basically because they have the same shape. I have twins, That's why I like to say that. But that 90 millimeter floating, when I compare it, and that's what I do on my test, with, of course, the same rod, the same line, and I cast on the land, not on the water. I cast on the land, I put a mark every time, I make 100 casts. I take the reference of the length, the distance, cast, I divide by 100, that gives me the average. So I do that not just with my lure, I do that also with the lure competition that I want to compare mine to. I end up to have an average of 15 yards longer cast.
Yards,
not feet.
You should say feet just to make a bigger number.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yes. And that's why I choose, I work on the shape, of course. Because if I have a bigger tail, I can have a heavier lure overall. I can make a longer cast, but then it kills the action. You have barely no action. I can make a thinner lure. I can increase a bit the craziness of the action, but then I lose in distance. I can have a lure a bit flatter, like the stick shad that I designed at the time of Sebile, which is really great when it comes to action, and which is pretty good for distance. So here, I work in a way that I was able to have a shape where I really optimize with that mindset of distance. And that's how I ended up to beat the distance, everything else. Again, you want to compare things that you can.
Right.
So I compare the same length, and in both cases with lures that are floaters. Because if you take a sinking and you want to compare a sinker which is heavier to a floating, of course the sinker makes a longer
Not apples
cast.
to apples. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you compare floating to floating, same 90 millimeter for everything I've tried. That beats everything, and that doesn't beat by 5 inch or 2 feet. No, that's a big difference.
Yeah.
And also, if you look right away, you can notice the hooks. The hooks are really strong, because that's one thing to use this same bait to catch a bass in open water. Then yes, you can have a very thin line, thin treble hooks, fine. And for those of the people who are with us now, who may think of the original stick shad, they may think, oh, I remember the time we have to change the hook from the stick shad. Well, indeed, because first when I released it, that was a lure I was mostly using for bass and perch and stuff like that, which fight a fifth of what a redfish or snook can fight. And that was the reason behind. That's why I have to redo a bit the balance and stuff like that. So right away when I designed the stick shad, the twitch shad, sorry, because I was speaking of stick shad just before. When I designed the twitch shad, right away I tuned it, I balanced it with hook. I mean, you can tell.
Yeah, that's good.
You know those hooks.
Super strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you can be fishing your reds and you can have a big snook in the middle swallowing your bait. You rely on those hooks. They do the job. Now, this shape for open water, for the flats, that's where I wanted a floating one. So I want a hard body.
This is
so it can float.
That's the different material there.
Definitely different. Now we talk of the twitcher. So same design, same shape, but the body is made of a very firm, soft plastic. I have a 300-pound wire through inside. And even the hooks, you notice, are different. There's a reason. They are different because this kind of hooks, in fact, so
those are heavy duty there.
They are also heavy duty, but the difference is on the twitch shad, because it's dedicated to fish open water like the flats and stuff like that. So there's rarely the case where your lure will eat a rock or something hard, right? So I prefer to choose what's called the Japanese style of hooks, which keep a very sharp hooks. That's very good when you fish with light line. But those type of hooks are not very good when it comes to hit against a wall. So I choose a different type of steel for the twitcher, because this guy, really, not to say you cannot use it in open water. Of course you can. That one is a bit bigger, is 4.5 inch kind of. It's sinking, it rolls on the sink, it's really great, but it's perfect when you want to fish along, for example, a seawall or pilings or underneath a bridge.
Close as possible to the structure.
Yeah, because most of the time the predator there will be close to the structure. So now, thanks to that material, you can you can bounce against the wall or the hard structure or the rocks. You will not break it. And you have the 300-pound wire inside. And even if we were to bend a bit, you just bend it back, you know. Yeah. And that's why the hook I choose is made with a German steel, which have different properties than the hook I choose for the twitch shad. And that's why to choose this guy, to choose that wire, have that properties that this kind of point handle much better. So they're a bit less sharp than those used on the twitch shad, but the point stay straight and sharp longer when it goes against rocks and hard structures.
Got it.
And typically, when you want to bounce that against a wall, you don't want to fish super light line, you know?
Yeah.
Because if there's a wall, probably you have structure around. So you typically use a heavier line and rod because you want to horse the fish. You know, you don't want that big snook, say, to bite and go run underneath the dock because, you know, it's pretty much done. Mm-hmm. So you fish hard. So that's why you see, so the same shape, both twitch bait. One is hard-bodied. It's really more dedicated for fishing in shallow water, top water. The other one is a sinker. It's a bit bigger. You can use the heavier line. You can fish it deeper. You still can fish it shallow if you want. If you start to work the bait right away when it's the water, you can keep it in less than 8 inches of water. So you still can use the twitcher pretty shallow. Now, from there, I moved to this other brand to talk about that's called Hyperlastics. You know, years ago, I want to say big kudos to Z-Man. You know, they came with their revolutionary and proprietary soft plastic, and it was great. And I saw a few other brands, I'm talking maybe, 10 years, or no, more, 15 years ago, who tried that. And there was even a time that even Z-Man, they start to do good and they kind of disappear. And it was, I think, mostly for two reasons. One was when people will put together the bait with regular soft plastic, people who are not used then, and they will see the soft plastic, melting.
Yeah.
They will be unhappy with that, and sometimes they will have some trouble to hook it. And over the years, they took their path and they do beautiful. I'm very appreciative, and I have no problem, and I never had, and I will never have problem to mention competition of mine when they do great, because kudos. I'm happy. I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to fish their product
helps
and
the
try
whole
them.
industry become more innovative.
Yeah, and me as an angler, I'm happy. They came with some stuff. They came with their net rig. They have a fantastic net rig, really. I mean, guys, if you like fishing for bass, I believe they just have a smallmouth bass record, a state record. I'm not sure which state that was cooked on their net rig. It's because that's a great thing. I'm not coming and saying, hey, guys, don't buy anything from any other brand. Just buy my stuff. No, it's stupid. I'm an angler. I know I want my box with a range of different lures and options. And that's where some companies, some brands come with real good stuff. And Z-Man is one of theirs. And kudos to them. So I fish their stuff. And their material, I find great side of it, great use and possibilities. And I find a few weaknesses. Nothing is perfect.
Yep.
Even mine. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to lower them to say no. So
this is like a similar material.
It's the same family of material.
Feels
what
like
happened?
It's impossible to break.
Yeah. So, well, basically, I will show you something on that larger one that will be easier to see on the screen. Well, years ago, I was reading a science magazine, and when I read that, there was one article about a material that some company was working on and developed, and the thing that caught my attention, there were really two things. One thing was, they developed that material because it was nature neutral. That means if you lose that material in the nature, it will not release any chemical that will hurt the nature, nothing that will kill insect or kill the grass or something. And I like that very much. I have already that approach in the past, even if I didn't promote that, but like the Magic Swimmer I had with Sebile, on the soft one, I choose certain type of soft plastic that have no phthalate, which are present in 90% of the soft plastic in the US, which are harmful to the nature. So when you lose a soft plastic in the water, it's no longer lure, it's pollution. It's a piece of plastic in the water. And when you lose it in the water, there's very little chance you or someone else will go in the bottom of the lake to grab it. And one of the results, create pollution. Some level is not crazy high, but some level of pollution is created by soft plastic. But worse than that, you have sometimes a fish like a bass that randomly swallowed that soft plastic in the bottom. Now it got stuck in his intestine. He cannot get rid of that. He cannot feed. And that fish may die or may not grow in his life because he have 1 or 2 or 3 soft plastic stuck in his stomach and stuff like that he cannot basically release to nature. You know what I mean? And that's part of where presence of phthalate can help them to develop some type of cancer. And I was aware of that 25 years ago. Without naming any company, but I know companies that when they release in Japan, it's totally forbidden. So the same company, the same brand, they will sell a soft plastic in the US that contain phthalate, which are cheap parts for the soft plastic. But in Japan, they will use just the high grade quality because there it's forbidden to have phthalate on the soft plastic. So that tells you a lot about the company who do things because it's for the money. Again, that's their right. It's not forbidden. That's not what I want to do. So when I released the Magic Swimmer Soft years ago, I choose a plastic, and I never mentioned that. I never try to make me look good and say, look, I choose a plastic. I never spoke about that, which maybe was a mistake, not on the business side, but to help open mind to people, to tell them, when we lose a soft plastic in the water, it turns into pollution.
Yeah.
You know? So at the end of the time, so that's why when I read about that material, I was like, I really like it. I really like it because they work on purpose to make sure that material, if it end up to be lost in the ground, in the water, nothing will be released that's harmful to nature. I love that. But beside of that, when I read the possibility that material have, I was like, wow. So I realized it was part of what's called the super plastics. That's part of where the Z-Man products are. It's just a different family within that group. Some of the things it allows, that's why I choose that larger size. Look, so I have a patent with a wire inside that holds that blade. That's a design I made roughly 92 to 95. There was not that plastic at the time, but I was planning to release that at the time at MEPS, Mr. Twister, sorry, and my boss at the time refused. He said, no, I don't want to mix a soft plastic, which is Mr. Twister, with a blade, which is MEPS. So he refused my proposal, my prototype, which I've been fishing. And so I keep that for years until I finally released it. So, but look, the material itself. Look what I'm going to do. I'm going to wrap the lure around my finger so I keep the metal part underneath. Now I want you to grab the head.
Okay.
And I want you to break that lure now. Break it. I mean, go. I mean, come on. Salt, not so much strong.
Will it
Salt, not so much strong. Kind of strong, but not so much.
It won't break.
So, it can, but really...
Okay, I was about to say, one of us is about to get whiplashed. That's crazy.
So...
I mean, that was some serious pressure on that.
Salt strong, just...
Hey, come on.
Serious pressure on that. So, because what I think, and that was one of the things I liked with Z-Man right away when they came with their great product, I was like, I don't think we should think that soft plastic must last very little. We want a soft plastic because the softness gives a range of swim action and possibility that are great to make fishing lures. And that I love. But when you have companies that are business oriented, they just want to think about a lure that, if possible, you lose the lure every time you have a bite, because then they sell more. And now, what's the main drive? It's not the angler who designed the lure, it's the salesman who want to sell more and more. Mm-hmm. For me, I think this type of material allows me to say, not only I have something that is neutral when it goes in the water, so I'm not harmful to the environment, and that truly matters to me and to my kids. When you see my logo again, that's me and my kids, and behind us, there's the earth. And the earth, well, 70% of it is water. So it's really a real thing. I'm not trying to be trendy. I've been like the same when I was, 10 years old. So that's the same thing, but I think it's really important. But beside of that, I find into that material that can last. We have guys. I have a guy who caught about 140 largemouth bass.
140
on one. I have a guy who caught 70 some redfish on one.
On a dart spin.
Dart spin. Yeah. One dart spin.
Wow.
I'm happy of that. And when I hear sometimes some guy who say, "Oh yeah, but maybe that will hurt the industry," whatever, I say, that's called evolution. The evolution has to be right. Today, you have an iPhone or something like this. You don't have any more, just a camera. It's just the evolution. To me, that's a good evolution. That's good for the angler and that's good for the nature. By the way, that's on the logo of Soft Stuff, the material. Good for the angler, good for the nature. Because that's true. That's no bullshit. That's real thing.
Yeah.
That's really good for both. So if you can have a soft plastic that have a great action and that lasts, well, you're going to catch more fish on it. It's a bit more costly, not much, a bit more costly than a regular soft plastic. But you catch so many more fish by lure that at the end of the day, it's even a cheaper way for the angler. So it's good for your money. It's good that you have lures that can do things over cans. For example, that material allow you, I guess it's hard to see on the camera here, but that's part of those different that material have with the Z-Man material. Again, great product. So I'm not saying bad thing. Sure. It's a different that offer different possibilities. Mine offer the possibility, the one I use at least in these lures here, offer the possibility to have very sharp edge, so I can have holes and slots. So when you want to rig or unrig, you take that example, that's a 7-inch dart spin. You have the swim bait hook with that. You see there's a cut, but there's also a hole that goes through from the belly to the back. You have also a hole underneath the chin. You have a hole in the nose. So when you want to rig it, most of the time, you don't even have to actually hook the plastic with the hook itself. You simply position your hook where it belongs to. So I take my hook, I go through, I turn backward, and now what I do, I hold the hook in one hand, I hold the back of the head with the other hand, I go in that hole, and here I am.
So simple.
Very simple.
Do it in reverse, huh?
Not only very simple, but it's also part of why the lure lasts so much longer. When you rig a soft plastic with a hook, when the hook goes through the plastic, it creates weak points. It damages the plastic.
Sure.
In that case, the plastic is made like that. It's not damaged because when you inject the material in the mold, the material goes uniformly into the mold. So there's no cut into the plastic because that was the shape of the mold, and that's part of why that material is very long lasting. But the fact it have its all allow for the lure to last longer by itself. So that's why when you see, so if we want to go quickly on this, that's the range, of the dart spin. For the moment, we have a 7-inch, we have the 5.5 that have been the most incredible lure for snook, redfish, and tarpon since we used that. And I'm not trying to oversell it. I'm very honest and sincere. Just speaking of tarpon, between a dozen of friends of myself, since September of last year to this date, we hook about 450 tarpon.
450
on this. Ooh. They crazily love that.
On
all
which,
the way
on this set of 4?
Well, for
five?
the moment, what we had really was the 5.5.
Okay.
Now we just got started to have the smaller one, like the 3.5, the 4.5. That's just opening more. But the redfish guys have done fantastic with it. The bass guys have done fantastic. You can rig it on a number of types. So you, like the pro here, they come with a wide gap hook, weighted. That's great to fish pretty shallow, and weedless.
Video here.
Yeah. But we have also those coming, like the 3.5 and the 4.5, they come on a small, jig head, more wide.
And this is that same material, even this little 3.5?
Oh, yeah.
Or is this a 3 or 3.5?
Yeah, 3.5, yeah. 3.5, the length is the total length.
With the blade.
Exactly,
okay,
with the blade.
That makes more sense.
Yeah. We have the 4.5. I mean, those are just, really, we have people who've been fishing with them. They are very much in love. Because the fact it lasts doesn't matter so much if the lure was not catching fish, right?
Yeah, we had Wader Dave. I mentioned him to you earlier. He wade fishes 220 days a year, and he owns a really nice boat and kayaks and paddleboards. He loves wade fishing, and he keeps talking about this dart spin. So I used it with him the first time, and it does work. This is like his go-to thing. And he tosses everything you can imagine. Well, he kept talking about this dart spin. Because he's one of our insider members. He keeps posting, he's like, what's this dart spin? And so it's happening, man. So, let's talk about the band of anglers. What, obviously, retail. Distribution's important for a lure company. Yeah. What are you doing? Obviously, you have a little bit of an advantage of all those past relationships and just the fact that
definitely
you are who you are.
And I'm so glad.
It seems to be exploding.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. We are, I consider we are year number 1 because last year my year 0 was really the year I spent most of my time to design lure. I came to the ICAST in 2018 just to let people know, look, I'm still in the industry. It's not because I'm no longer of pure fishing that I'm out, but I didn't have much to show or to tell to people beside of I'm back. But wait for next year, which is this year. So 2 months ago at the ICAST, we have a pretty decent sized booth. I have my tank, which I love to play with, so people can really see the action of the lures. And we came with 29 lures to cover a wide range from inshore fishing.
Shrimp now too.
Yeah, the nut shrimp.
If you guys can see that.
Yeah.
And that's the same material too?
Yeah.
Because that looks so thin there. But
so of course the thinner, the more you will break. At some point you break. The thinner it is, if you put more. And that's a prototype. The final is a bit thicker here, by the way. But that, typically when you work on prototype, you go by steps. You make tries and change. There's always a bit of try and error, into the mix. But so far we. So that's why this is our number 1, and so far we have already major chains who have selected us. Bass Pro will be with us. We have Dick's Sporting Goods. We have West Marine, Shells. There's really a number. Many shops, many retailers, and I really appreciate especially the relationship with the small and medium-sized retailer because they are a bit of the backbone, They are most of the time the people who have really the knowledge, And it's great to go in a big shop because, of course, you see a big range, you see a big, square footage, a lot of range, and it's very exciting. I will remember forever my first time in Bass Pro shops many years ago.
Quite the experience, right?
Coming from France, where the biggest shops were maybe 1,000 square feet. Big, arriving in a Bass Pro shop, I was like, I knew I got the catalog already for years, but typically the small and medium shop are owned by people and run by people who are passionate, who know their thing. I know a number of owners of shops who are people who are able to have a career in a different field where they can make more money, and they choose kind of like I did, they choose to go or to stick to the fishing industry because it was their passion.
Yep.
And that's why I always have, and I think I will always, and I believe and I hope, always have a great relationship with the small and medium shop because they have something special. And we need them. We need them, not I'm talking as for the business. We need them because they really are the backbone of fishing. They are the place when you're not sure what to use locally, where you have good chance to find a gentleman or lady sometimes who can give you the right information, who can drive you to that bait that really is the one that locally, maybe not 50 miles away, but maybe locally that one bait that does better, and stuff like that. And also have live bait and stuff like that. So it's a complex thing. We need to be everywhere to make a living of that in our position as a Benevengler, as a company, like all the other companies. There's no difference. But really, we have opened so many doors in so little time in what I call year number one, which is this year is unbelievable. And my good friend and long-time friend who now works with me and partner with me was Paul Micheli. That's a fantastic thing, to have him with me.
Great guy.
Yeah, we've been friends for a long time. We've been in competition. We are in a friendly competition. He was running Yosery when I was running Sebile. So, of course, we are fighting for the same pegs in the shops. And that's great today to have that experience where now we're together driving the same car, to say. Yeah. And some of the lure had a very strong appeal to the people whom we presented them. So to stay in hyperelastics, one of the lure that we've presented the last several months and we have people fishing with for almost a year now is this guy that's called the Minwao. So in that case, I visited a conventional shape and I bring my innovation, I bring my, the fact that material allows me, for those holes and slots that go through so easy to rig. I have also a patent that you find on a number of lures, including the dart spin, by the way, where if you want to describe, I have those
So
holes and fingers.
You have two holes in the actual that are like pre-manufactured, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have these two little, what do you call them, the worm keepers? I mean, I don't know
a word which I just forgot.
It's some type of keeper.
Type of specific
Bass guys
keeper.
call it worm keepers, but it literally not just has like a little notch, it fits right in.
And that's why you push and you want to pull. So you push the lure and then you pull from the belly.
I got it.
You do that 3 times, 4 times maybe, and now you have those two little finger keepers going into the holes.
That's crazy.
And now you have something really. So even on a teeny bait like this guy, the Minwao, the first size we come with is 2 3/4. So a teeny guy, but as you know, there's many times where the redfish, the sea trout, the snook, even the tarpon, there are times what they want are very teeny preys.
Oh yeah.
So now you have a teeny prey.
Kill it when you got little glass noses. You're just trying to.
Really it has. I mean, really. And we have the two versions. We have the injected color version like we do for the, the dart spin. That's why we have the pros which are painted and more realistic look. Mm-hmm. And we have the regular one where there's no paint. It's just color injected as the same lure, just the finish differ. Well, in the case of the Minwao, we have bags of, I think it's 4 bodies and 1 jig head. So, and those are not painted. So we have a range of a dozen color, I think. And then we have the Pro. And the Pro, in that case, I think we have 3 bodies. Those are painted, so more realistic finish. And we have a wide gap weighted hook. And thanks to that, now, if you want to fish with a more finesse approach, that's why I choose to go with the Pros with the wide gap hook. It's when the fish are maybe more finicky and you want to have this approach. But both goes together. Then we have the natural shrimp, the nat shrimp. We have 2 models. We have the sinking one, is the one I'm showing you, where the weight is inside. And we have the floating, which have no hook. You have to hook it yourself. It's the same mold, in fact. And that material gives an incredible amount of life. So when you cast this guy and he drops in the water, the leg actually works like if you've seen a true swimming shrimp in the water, that's very, very, very close, extremely close to that. You just do nothing. You let it go. And the legs, that's why the shape, the angle of the leg, together with the material.
And just doing quick little pops off the bottom? Or?
And when you pop it, look, what do you see when you're fishing on the flats and suddenly a red or a trout sees a shrimp and chases it? What happens? What does the shrimp then?
Starts backing up, starts moving away. Yeah.
Exactly. He move away, he go back up, and he go to the top, and he jump out of the water.
Yeah.
Well, this guy, with the right cadence, you bring it to the top.
And it's almost that same...
And then the tail does that. So every time you give a twitch, you have the tail that bends and hits the water and make those teeny explosion of water like a fleeing shrimp on the top. And then when you let it dive, it does a spiral down. And then it lands on the floor. And then you twitch it again and it bends like this. I made a hook really very good, very strong, because sometimes you pretty good fish, so it's stronger, like 20% stronger than the strongest of my competition shrimp. Because I knew sometimes, when you catch 1.5 redfish, no big deal. Once suddenly you have a big bull red or you have a tarpon on, you hate to finish the fight with open hook, right? So that's why I made sure to have a very high quality wire. And that's why I have a thin hook, so you still can use a light line, but it's a very strong. That's why, in that case, very simple. What I did, I booked the different shrimp on the market. I made pull tests to know how strong were their hook. I took the strongest of them. I make mine 20% stronger. You see, sometimes the innovation is a very complex thing, but sometimes I do that because I just want to make sure I really have a hook. Again, you don't see a super thick hook. You still see a hook that I hope, you feel okay. If you want to use 10-pound braid, you still see, okay, it's not too big. I can use my light line with that hook. But I also know that 20% stronger can be the whole difference between losing a fish or landing the fish. And the floating one is the same body, and you have a single hook in the pack. And now you can hook through the nose. In that case, you can just steady retrieve it on the top. You make a teeny wake and the legs move. You can hook it sideways. So now it pops on the top like this. So it's perfect. When you see the reds coming and you have some grass typically, you see the reds coming and you know they're very spooky. So you don't want to cast in front of them. So you cast, say, 20 feet or even more in front of them, and then you don't move the lure. And that's why when you hook the single hook through the tail on the first joint here, it just floats and stays still here. And now when the red arrive, like a feet or two, now you make a little twitch and basically the shrimp bends like this, and it's like 100% chance that red is going to go and swallow and smoke
I love it.
This shrimp.
So I got a quick question.
Sure.
We're talking through this. What's your honest opinion on scent?
No, it's very. To me, it's funny
none
because
of these have scent, right? I assume.
No,
they're not
none have
injected with scent.
Some of them I didn't say that, but the twitcher have a hole where we can put a brass rattle, so it can be noisy or silent, or you can put scent. But here's my point: it's very simple. Scent are very efficient, but then why don't you fish with bait? I mean, if I fish with a lure, I like to lure a fish. Okay, so if I end up to take a lure that's made basically of corn, and that's filled with different type of scent, and it's smelly and stuff like that, well, in that case, why don't I take a piece of squid? I mean, do what you want, whatever. So some fish doesn't matter much. Like the snook, the scent, I've never seen really any efficiency with a bait that's scented. But the redfish, you know that. You know there's a number of like the fish strip, I think is the name, or stuff like that. Gulp alive, of course. You can simply hook on the hook. You put in the water. You don't even move. That's why it's no more a lure fishing.
You could still,
Yeah. So in that case, why don't you put finger mullet? I mean, again, I'm not saying people to do that. What I mean by that is, if you have those things because it's convenient, you always have in your box, and then you want to make a break, and you put that in because you don't have a cast net. Maybe you don't know how to cast cast net, or maybe you have that in your car and you're in Tampa and you want to go on the bridge, the Sky Mile Bridge, Skyway, and after work and maybe there's no shrimp available. That's a good way to do that. But if you like I do, if you like fishing with lure because you like to fool the fish, and a big part of your excitement is you made a fish swallowing a thing that's a piece of plastic or wood or lead or something, that's part of what excites me a lot, to fool a fish. If in fact the feet have a very strong scent, that's for the fish who basically breathe the water, because the fish they have no nose. Even if they have holes on the nose, their nostril act in fact like what we have in the mouth. So they taste the water, they don't smell the water. But for them, at the end of the day, if what they feel is like, oh yeah, there's a good taste in that water, there's a dead bait here. And I mean, cool, but it's not the same thing as fooling, because now it's not about the action. What I like to fool is thanks to the action of my lures or other lures.
Yeah, I was just curious because my brother Luke has been doing some tests, and he already published one, and he was doing staying in one spot, 3 casts with, let's just say a dart. It wasn't a dart spin, but whatever bait it was, no scent, and then 3 casts with Procure loaded all over it, and it didn't make any difference. And in many cases, the other one won.
And here's the other thing, and that's a little bit of what I just said when I speak about casting and leaving the lure, those kind of lure, because really they act as a bait. not a lure, as a bait. And the scent, in fact, visually, if you have a black line and you follow a black line, you know a direction. But in fact, when scent goes in the water, it goes in every direction. And then at the same time, if you move that lure, if it's not on one spot, if it's on one spot, you have a procure and you leave it on the floor and say so you don't move the lure at all, okay? And then you have a little current, like half knot. So you will have that tray of smell going in the current. So maybe at one point, a redfish who's 30 yards away will swim and cross that line of water, which grows, of course, because little by little it expands, and it dissolves too. It's less concentrated. So that's how the fish will taste. There's some element that tells him there's some food around. And then he will, because he's made for that, the way his captors are made in his mouth and outside of his body, he will find where is the main line of that blood trail, say, is, and he will swim back and go there and find it. But that's a kind of a slow process. As soon as you move at just at the medium, what we will call as lure angler medium speed, it's impossible for a fish to follow the tray. So when people tell me, oh yeah, but then if you have a scented bait, it will keep the bait longer in the mouth, then that means you didn't attract the fish to bite the bait. He bite that lure because the action given to the lure bring him to bite. Now you have it in the mouth. Well, you set the hook. What's the point? Are you going to wait for him to chew it? Oh, it's tasty. I love it. No, you feel the bite to set the hook, period. So that's why that's the second point, and I'm very okay with what your brother did at Steph, because I did that too. And I did that professionally, not just for my fun.
Yeah.
Indeed, as soon as you start to have a decent speed, and I'm not speaking of high speed at all, just a normal, decent speed of fishing, the tray is lost in the water. The fish is not able to follow, to go to that bait because of the smell. No, that's not the case.
And there are some baits like, gulp that do work well in scent, right? And you could dead stick them, and we've done that and caught pretty big fish.
Yeah, because now you can create that trail and the fish can find it. But if you take the lure as itself, the thing is, for most predator, and there are a number of studies and publications who clearly state that, for many fish, most of fish brain are that big. And some of them are that big, okay? Mm-hmm. So it's much, much less complicated than the human brain. So it has been proven in a number of studies and publications that, in fact, the fact that something moves means it's meat. If it's still, maybe it's meat, maybe it's not. Because grass, vegetables don't move. But when something starts to have a movement, that the simple meaning for a fish is that's meat, because it's driven by meat. There's meat in that thing that's moving. That's the only way for it to move, beside of just a fall, like a mangrove, seed fell in the water,
throwing a rock in,
or a rock that fell in the water. But beside of that, and that's why there's a number of times that, in fact, you can actually use a jig head with nothing on it, and just you work it and you jig it and you catch fish. Is it the best thing to catch a fish? No, it's not. There's very few signal, but there's the very basic, the 0 versus 1. The 1 signal is that have a movement. When I was guiding in Africa, one of the things I was targeting were the giant tarpon, and I actually ended up to guide for the All Tackle World Record tarpon. When I was fishing on some specific places, I knew I have to have different position of my lines. And one of the best position in terms of bite was actually to have my hook. And I'm very accurate in what I say. My hook have to be between 2 and 3 feet above the bottom. And that's because there's a water effect when you have a big mass of water that moves very fast. I was fishing typically between 3 and 7 knots of current where I was fishing, where I was catching those giant 250-pound tarpon. And but close to the bottom, and it's based also on the overall depth of the water, but you have an area of turbulence where the current can be close to 0, very low, or even sometimes backward. And that's a favorite spot for many predators, and the tarpon especially. They love to be there because they don't have to use energy. They stay on the spot, and with their eyes, which are directed towards them or on top of them, they can keep watching at the water and things that are moving, and when they see something there, it means it's a prey, and now they just can go and grab it, and they go back in that zone where they spend no energy, okay? So by simply putting my rod, the rod I will put to have that one hook 2 to 3 feet above the bottom. That means just in the current, just above that zone that have no movement or very, very little movement. So before I will put a bait or soft plastic on the circle hook, first I will put a heavier weight just to help me to find exactly how much of line I have to let go, because there was a strong current. Because if I were to put a very heavy line, there will be a lot of drag effect, almost no bite.
Yeah.
Jacks, okay. Barracudas, okay. Tarpon, almost no bite. So I find after years and experience and try and error, that I have a range of weight that I can play with. If I have too much weight, there was too much tension, not few bites. I was really dropping very, very quickly. I made statistics, so it really helps me to understand what works best. So when I was searching that length of line, from my boat, from the rod, the length of line I have to let go with a given weight in a given current. So to have my circle hook with the bait or the soft plastic that was, like 3-4 feet behind to be at the same position, at the right position, I have to play with that heavier weight and that experience. At some point, there's a few things you cannot exactly explain, but I knew at the time I will find the right length. That extra weight was attached to the main weight. When I will do that on purpose, I will never put a bait or a lure on the circle hook. I cooked a good dozen of giant 250 pound tarpon on a circle hook alone. Just because when I was searching for that bottom, the circle hook was just having some kind of motion in the current. Yeah. So it was not a piece of grass or something.
And they thought it was food.
That was it. That was just a big 16 or 18 odd circle hook with nothing on it. If I caught one fish in my life, maybe I will just name that. Oh, that was funny. No, I got like a dozen. And the time you spend just to make the setting of your line, maybe it's 1 minute. So the amount of time I fish the amount of time I was just making the right setting of my line to put the line in place, to get about a dozen of giant tarpon on my circle hook, that amount of time spent was extremely small. So that proved that just the movement have a certain value. So that's why when you mention those kind of bait, it doesn't really matter the shape they have. Because to a certain extent, especially when you have that kind of jigging action, the fact you give a jigging action, you can put pretty much a butt from a cigarette on a jig head and have that jigging action, and you will catch some fish. Now, there's very little action, it's very limited, it's not great. If it was great, probably we will not be where we are in the fishing world with many lures. And I'm very sure of what I'm saying here. I'm very honest. But that has some action. So that's why most of the bites that occur when a guy uses a type of soft plastic that's infused with smells, in fact, most of the bite he got is really just because he was using that bait and he was moving it. And if he has the exact same shape, really exact same shape, on the same jig head, and do the same movement, I'm very, very sure he will have the same bites. I'm very sure of that.
I kind of have to believe you, since you've caught more fish than anyone I know. And more world records. Let's. I see the time is about to run out of batteries. Let's talk about spool tech real quick as well, because that happened somewhat recently. You guys, did you acquire spool tech? Is that what happened?
Yeah, about a bit more now, a bit more than a year ago.
And a lot of people maybe in Texas and Virginia and the Carolinas might not know this as well. This is massive here in Florida, especially South Florida.
Yeah,
that guy Dave Just was not that long ago, like last 10 years, like he was just catching monster snook on these spool tags. And I ended up buying some myself. I own them. Pretty innovative.
Oh, yeah. No,
lure.
Not pretty. The lure is a good lure. But really what's super mega innovative is not the lure, it's one device within the lure, which makes the entire difference. Because as a swim bait, it's a good swim bait. And honestly, there's a number of good swim bait. But really what's super unique and when I saw, I think it's like 5-6 years ago, I'm not sure exactly which year, but give or take 5-6 years, maybe 7 years, I'm not sure of that, but ago, when I saw first spool tech and I saw that innovation, I was like, wow, great, because I'm really happy. I have my passion, so I'm not driven because I want to do business first, but by my passion. So when I see a company, when I see a designer who come with what I believe to be a great design,
real innovative.
I'm super happy. I'm super excited. I want to buy it. I want it to fish with it.
Yeah.
I want it to be part of my collection. So when I saw them coming with that, and I saw this very unique innovation, I was like, Groot for them. Great. And I was thinking, really, I wish I invented it myself. I work a little bit on the same problems. Not problem is not the right word, but the same point. But I approached it differently, and the approach of Chris Walsh, that's really the one who invented that, was really much better than the approach I had myself before. And so for those of you who don't know about it, well, what is it about? Why are we talking of something special here? So special, really so special. Well, there's a few reasons why that innovation we're going to talk about a little bit is so important. Because first, when you fish with lure, there's kind of a constant thing that the thicker the leader you have, and the less the lure behave well. So the thinner the line, the best the lure explain itself, the best the lure, have its own swim action and basically attract fish. Also, the second point is the fish themselves. When you have a bigger leader, I don't believe the fact the fish see the leader is important. I don't care. But the lateral line of the fish is very important. So the bigger you have a leader in the water, the more you have a kind of drag in the water, and that the fish can feel it. And that's a big reason that very often fish refuse to bite the lure, is the drag created by the leader. It's just linked to what I just said before about the tarpon. When I was putting too much weight, there was too much drag, my number of bites was sinking dramatically, just because the amount of drag in the water. So when you have a thinner leader, the lure swim better, the fish are more likely to be fooled, so it's great. And beside of that, a totally different point is all of us, I don't know, maybe not you, but I have lost a number of fish in my life. And typically when I lose a fish, it's not the fish that have the hook down deep hooked inside the throat, right? The fish you lose is most likely a fish that's barely hooked on the side of the mouth. Yeah. And I will even say that typically it's not a small fish. Because the small fish hooks, well, first, if you lose it, you don't care much.
True.
And typically because they are small and light, you can crank them back, and they just can do a thing. They follow and they come, and you lose them. Sometimes you grab them in your hand, and that's when the lure falls down. But when you speak of a sizable fish, the one you really want to catch, and maybe a trophy fish, and then suddenly you see the hook, and sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you just fight. Oh, I lost the fish. You've not seen the fish. You don't know. You're not sure how and which way the hook was hooked. But many times you even see that, and you're fighting, and you're in that situation. You're fighting the fish, and finally you see it, and you have that big, beautiful red and something. And you see the hook is just right here. You see the hook holds maybe 1 or 2 millimeters of meat at the corner of the mouth, and you're like, oh. And you know suddenly that your chance to land that fish, suddenly you realize they just shrank and shrank and shrank and shrank a lot. So that's the major thing that makes you lose fish, is a hook that's barely hooked, because then at some point, the fish fight, and that's why we like fishing too, right? Because the fish is moving in the water, it fights, and he shakes the head, and quite often the shake-off is what brings the lure to fly away, because what happens is you have the leverage on that hook, which is barely hooked in the fish mouth. You have the leverage and the weight of the lure itself that are fighting against that hook. And that's why those 3 key points, especially last one, which is the most important, are why Spooltech is such a great brand, because they bring that solution.
There it is. If you guys are watching on video, if you're listening, he basically a hidden leader. Is this a steel one? Yeah.
Yes.
That's the steel leader inside.
Yeah. So that spool, and that's why it's a brilliant concept and patent, is very well done. You have that spool inside of the lure. You have a leader, so mostly steel, but in some of the new ones, especially for bass, we will have a braid leader on limited series for bass with freshwater, bass-oriented colors. But you have a stainless steel leader inside. So that's why now you can have a thinner leader, because, typically you put a leader, it's because the fish mouth, their teeth, or their gill plate, So now you can have a thinner line, so the lure swim better. You have more bites because the lure swim better, and because the fish lateral line don't feel the drag of the big leader in the water. Mm-hmm. But now if you hook your fish, now here you go. Now you have not just a bigger leader, not a piece of fluorocarbon. Now you have, in that case, and most of them have stainless steel leader. But the lure just went away several inches from the hook. So you don't have that immediate, leverage from the hook, from the lure body to the hook. It's even better than that, in fact. when you really spend time fishing with a spool tech lure, what do you see? You see that when you fight the fish, like a bass or a snook, which tend to jump and shake their head on the top more than a red. I mean, the red does shake also, but very often they shake their head close to the bottom. So you don't see as well as you can see when it comes to a bass or to a snook. What you see is when they come and they shake the head, and I do that like on a slow motion kind of. In fact, when you see your line coming, most of the time the hook is at the opposite, the lure, goes where the line, away from where the line is at that moment where the fish shake the head. In fact, that helps to absorb the tension. That also helps to lower the amount of fish that are lost.
Spit the hook, yeah.
Spit the hook. And that's why it's a fantastic innovation. That's really a fantastic innovation. And once you start using that, you see how great it is in a very large range of case. And that's why, there's right now there's 2 models, but by the end of this year, we'll have 5 different models. We have also increased the size. But just to speak of the current size, this model is called the Fatty. It comes in 4 and 6 inch. The one I'm showing you now is a 4 inch. It's great because now you have, 4 inch is a bait fish size that goes for so many predators, right?
Oh, yeah.
And both in fresh and saltwater. But now, thanks to that stainless steel leader, if you're targeting reds or trout, and suddenly you hook a big snook or a tarpon, you have many, many more chance to land your fish because you have that leader, because the lure goes away from the hook. Yep. It's no joke. And that's why it became quite popular here in Florida. First, because both Dave Justice and Chris Walsh are from Florida, so it, of course, helped. They were fishing a number of times when people saw them fishing and using those lures and succeeding. And but it's not limited to that, really. It's true for reds. How many times have you seen a big trout? You've been in Texas. I've been fishing, places like Corpus Christi and places like that. And you hook a trophy, those big, 9-pound trout.
Gator trout, oh yeah.
Gator trout. And part of the lip is very thin. So, of course, they are more likely to be lost than that teeny, 18-inch trout, right? Well, that's one of those many cases where a spool tech allows you to land a fish. If the hook was not very well hooked, because that we never know. The lure is, 40 yards away from us when we reel and we have the bite. So no one knows exactly where the hook will be hooked into the mouth. But that really helps. It's not a gimmick at all. It's really, really something extremely efficient. And that's what drove me basically to say, well, let's go. Chris Walsh was really interested to have me to take care of the brand, take over of the company. He told me that years ago, and I was, 3-4 years ago, I was at Pure Fishing at the time. I say, well, no, I mean, I'm at Pure Fishing. But then he came back again last year, and I was building a band of anglers and say, really, I believe in you to be able to create new shape and to make an evolution to those lures. And I took over that, and I was super happy. We ended up to buy spool tech and the patents and everything
awesome.
More than a year ago now, and that's really awesome. And for those of you who already know that lure and that brand, for the moment the tail they have. So first you can change the tail. Some people may not know that, but in fact there's another patent which allows you to change the tail. So when the tail is damaged, is cut, that happens. That's fishing. It's soft plastic, right? Well, you can remove from the body. You saw the way that patent works. You see, it's super easy. You even have a little hole underneath the belly. So if it turns, say you have some sand or mud or something that kind of clog the system here, you see, I plug back the tail, you hear the click, so you know when it's in place. So if it turns to be too hard to remove with your fingers, that's why there's this hole here. You take a little tool, little screwdriver or something,
right now,
and you just push. And this way, always go outside. So one of the things I want to say first is, on the packaging itself, there's a drawing that shows how to retie the hook. Because sometimes people are like, well, that's fantastic lure. I've been catching, say, 25 snook on it, and now the end of the leader is very damaged. I'm afraid it's going to break. Sometimes it may break, even stainless steel leader after a number of use. Well, it's not made to last forever. I don't know any that's made to last forever. Yeah. So there's a drawing on the package that shows you exactly how to retie your hook. So if you have, say, the last, for example, 2-inch or 1-inch of leader that's damaged, just cut it. What I do, my tip is I take a drop of super glue where I want to cut. So I put first my drop of super glue. I let it dry it, a minute or so. You put some saliva, it dries instantly. And then you cut in the middle of where you put this drop of super glue. It avoids for the 49 strands of wire, just to go, crazy fancy, which then it's more difficult to tie the knot and whatever. And once you do that, then you follow the instruction on the package. There's the knot. You redo your knot so you can retie the hook. Or if you want to put a different hook, maybe a smaller or bigger, I don't know, something different, then you can change. And the other thing, as now the brand, is part of the portfolio of Urban Anglers, and I've been working on them. I smooth the bodies, so it allows for a bit better finish, but that's not so much an important thing. It allows me to have a more uniform link between the tail and the body, and within a few months, we'll have the tail packs. That means we will be selling the tail alone, and the new tails that are coming soon are made of soft stuff, like the dart spin. So last much longer than the regular soft plastic that have been used since then. And I've also added shapes of tails and size. So that's where we are.
Awesome, my friend. So, like, what next? What you coming up with? I don't know if you can share some of the stuff, but man,
I can show you maybe a few sketches. I don't know.
Jeez. So. And are you selling them direct too on your site, or
So we do because I think today I'll be very straight and honest. That's always the best way to go anyway. We are today at the time where the human beings, at least in the Western world, want quite often to be able to have something right away. So yes, we do sell ourselves. We do sell on our website, but at the same time, I'm very honest by saying, well, we have the entire range on the website. I really always strongly suggest the anglers go in the shops, in the big chain, in the little shop, but go in the shops, go see what they have. Yeah. They have already a range, and most of the time they will choose models and colors that are relevant to your area. It doesn't mean they are always right, but that can be helpful. And then you can have a local knowledge thanks to the sales guy who's there who can tell you. But if you don't find a specific shape or size or color, well, we have everything on the website. But we don't tune that in a way to be the competition to the shops. We do really believe that the shops are really important. I really think the shops are the backbone of the fishing world because, that's not a place you just go to buy stuff.
Right.
When you go buy shoes, all right, you go buy shoes. You know what I mean? When you go, if you're an angler especially, you go to a shop because also that's part of your experience, of your love of fishing. Mm-hmm. You go in the shop maybe to buy a $3.99 bag of hooks, but you spend 1 hour, just look around, wondering, thinking, dreaming. You talk with the owner. You see another guy who's also like you. Maybe you see a guy, suddenly you come and take that lure and you buy 5 of them. Now something's going on. Yeah. Maybe you ask, and you can ask, maybe the guy will not answer you, but maybe he will say, well, I just find that this lure right here, right now, I've done fantastic. So I was there last night, and there were giant snook. I broke 5. I need to buy more lures, but yeah. So you may get kind of information that I'm not saying you cannot have at all on the internet, but not the same way, and maybe more difficult, in fact, to find sometimes. Yeah. If you're in a shop, the guy can tell you right now the bite is on the South Bridge, but not on the North.
Yep.
So that's one of the things. And that's why I like the communities. That's in the mindset of Urban Anglers. That's in the mindset, obviously, of Soul Strong as well. And so that's why we're online, but we really tell people, we work with retailers, and they typically can be very helpful. Now, if you don't find what you want, we have them online.
Are you in the big ones yet? I know you mentioned Bass Pro and Dick's, and you are, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
We are super happy because this iCast and then Paul Micheli joining us have given us the chance to show that range of 29 lures to a number of people, and many people have been excited. That's why I know, as a matter of fact, that starting very soon, in just 2-3 months, we'll have a lot of shops carrying my creations.
So big 2020, my man.
Very big, I think so.
Big 2020. Well, huge congratulations.
Thank you.
Social media, you guys have Instagram and doing all that stuff?
Yeah,
I know it's still
we have
you're more interested in
I don't really follow
stuff.
much. And I'll be honest with you, I have my 2 young kids, they are twins, a boy and a girl. They are 3.5 years old, and they're the best thing in my life, really, even above fishing or anything. I was made to be a dad.
For those of you who can't see this, your face lights up when you talk about family from your kids and your mom and dad. and then baits. When you both those things, I watched your face just like light up.
And that's why I want to spend time with them.
Yeah.
And I do spend time with them. And before that, I was starting to be maybe a bit too much in Facebook, and I was starting to read. And I am like, you know what? I need to go away because, well, sometimes you see negativity of some people, and I'm like, and I'm not just speaking on my page. In fact, we have very few, some, but it seems some people go there because they have something bad in their stomach and they need to go and. So a couple of months ago, I started to not connect to Facebook.
Good
and I think since the iCast, I'm not kidding you, I think since the iCast, I went 2 times on Facebook for maybe 10 minutes each time. And I'm kind of glad. But instead, we have almost 100,000 followers.
Yeah.
So
you have a team now. So definitely go like them on Facebook, Instagram.
Instagram as well.
And buy some of these lures. I know I can speak for me. I have used these, the dart spin. I mean, pretty brilliant. You got the blade on the back. It's pretty lethal. And this material, that was not like a scripted thing. I had to wrap my hand around to try to break that sucker. It was amazing. So I would say definitely check these out. And I'm excited when these little guys come out. Actually, no, I think this might be like that's kind of in between. I like this one, but man, with that blade in the back.
They just complement each other. That's really what it is. Yeah. They complement each other. But you see, about the thing that sometimes when you... Look.
Yeah, I like that guy. What is this one called again?
That one is called the Min Wow. Because it's a minnow, and I think when you see the action, it brings you to be like, wow! So I took Min Wow. That's Min Wow. But you see, for example, when you take a hook, you take that very case of the teeny 3.5 inch dart spin. You can hook it. So what I do, you see, I wet the hook so it slides better when it goes in the hole. Because again, we already have the hole and the slots, so it's very easy. So remember, with that patent I have here, what I do is you push and then you pull on the belly, and you push and you pull on the belly. So you see it goes. And in that case, you just need to go on one because that's a teeny one. There's only one. When you have it like this, and if you want, you can go all the way. But my point is very simple. When I hook it like this, you have the curve, the curve of the belly that goes like this, and the tail is up, right? So when you fish on the flats and you cast and retrieve and you want to jig it, that's where you have the faster dive, when you have that position. Now, what you do, you turn it the other way. You go through the hole that's already there. That's all the way to the belly here. Okay? So you think, what's the difference now? Well, now I have the flat part here. Mm-hmm. In fact, instead of falling like this, if I fall like that, my speed drop is almost half when I rig it like this than when I rig it the other way. So if you want to fish in super skinny water, you just rig it the other way around. So you see the same lure, the same jig head, you just turn the bait 180 degrees. And you have a very big difference in the way the bait works. So,
Patrick, it's been a pleasure, man. What a fun day.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you for coming.
I've learned so much, and I know I had a video we'll put on Instagram, too, of you actually getting on your computer and showing how just your mind works and drawing stuff. So cool. So cool. Everyone, check out Band of Anglers. Go like them. Buy some of these lures. And send them pics. You guys love the pics, right? I've been watching your Instagram and Facebook, and because I am on there, and it's cool seeing all these people. You're creating memories out there, and I love it, man. Cool, guys. Thank you. If you love this episode, please do share it, like it, give us a review, tell us how we're doing, and once again, reach out to Patrick and tell him how much you love these lures and even the new spool techs. Sounds like you guys are going to make them even more innovative. So, awesome, guys. Thank you so much. We out.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul.